All right, so we're live now. This is my channel, formerly known as Spacepan. I called it the Antisocial Contract because I thought that name was, I don't know, more appropriate and clever or whatever. Um,
Hello.
yeah, and Ashley's here and Jay is here. So we're doing a stream. We are doing a stream like old times, and it's good times.
Yeah, I feel as though sometimes like maybe 20% of the time I actually have a decent radio voice, and then the rest of the time I just sound like a croaky 75-year-old chain smoker, um, chain smoking tranny kind of thing.
You
And
know, I
it's
wouldn't worry about that because I feel
yeah,
like people are so used to like amateurs streaming shit all the time now that now we're so much more tolerant of like however anyone sounds.
right.
Not to say that you need that leeway in particular.
Yeah. But yeah, like some people have told me that at least some of the time I have a good what's the phrase, radio voice. So yeah, that might be something fun to look into because you can do that for a living. Stardust does it. He does the voiceover for some vaguely educational-ish YouTube channels like top five lists and so on. Although the thing is, he's actually never made that publicly available information. He's never said it on his main channel. But I remember seeing a video on one of those channels that just does lists like top five, this or that, and it was definitely his voice. So apparently that's one of his side hustles.
Wait, I'm sorry, I missed who you said it was.
Stardust.
Oh, Stardust? Oh, he has like a
Yeah.
separate secret. His voice is great. Oh my goodness.
Yeah.
Yeah, he could read a recipe to me, and I'll coo like a baby and fall asleep in a nice way.
Harmful opinions too. Yeah.
Yeah, but
He,
I like someone even if they just have like a distinct voice. Oh, like a great example is Naked Ape. Remember Naked Ape?
yeah.
Oh yeah, he had that like wiry, super whiny voice, and it was really funny because when he like hit his fever pitch, it was really dramatic, you know. Like I like it was almost like a like 40% of the way to like Gilbert Gottfried,
Right.
and
Yeah.
most people would probably listen to a Gilbert Gottfried podcast. Is he dead? Like what the fuck has he been doing?
I also had this idea since we're going to be talking about trigonometry. I had this funny idea that we could make a tier list of content creators by their intelligence, their honesty, and their ability to accurately ascertain various things about the nature of reality, basically just their baseness kind of thing, and intelligence. So there could be all kinds of tiers, like you could have no brow, then low brow, then lower middle brow, then middle brow, then upper middle brow, and then up highbrow second class and highbrow first class. I'm
Yeah,
just
you could
trying.
just do a tier
Yeah,
list with S through F, and just make it the
yeah.
level of brows, and then you could have like a little face around the S tier. They have like 16 eyebrows.
Okay, but I was wanting to ask you this. I know this is like, do you think Tim Pool should be low brow or lower middle? Because I think he's definitely one of those. It's just
I think it depends on whether or not you think he's controlled opposition or not.
right. Do you
No,
I
but
think?
believe it's
I wouldn't want to build a list like that. No,
everybody. Well,
I abstain from that project 100% because I technically am a content creator and I'm not about to make my house any more glass than it needs to be.
Hmm.
Sorry, Jake, what were you saying?
I think I just like to do is I just like to speak my mind, like, but I guess that's kind of like unimportant. But I think that basically everybody who basically and using some sophist, some form of sophistry to justify it as basically all controlled opposition if they claim to oppose the status quo or whatever, you know what I'm saying?
Do they? I mean, I think in general, sure. Well, but I feel like everybody who has something to say, like they're challenging some part of the status quo, right? Like I don't think there's any person who's like just fine with everything, and their big gripe is making sure that nobody fusses around or changes anything, right? I guess if that's your viewpoint, right, you would be like one of the reptilian elites, and then of course you'd never just overtly say that because it would be silly and like counterintuitive, you know?
ContraPoints?
No,
Right,
it'd be counterintuitive.
because
Oh,
like
sorry, you're saying that's an example? ContraPoints, I think, is. I mean, it's definitely like a project, you know, like
The
it's a
status
whole
quo,
thing.
the status,
Yeah, I was using. I
like
was
the
just using.
status quo is basically wanting to change everything for the better.
Yeah, I was using ContraPoints as an example of someone who upholds the status quo.
Oh, yeah. I mean, but of course,
Well,
you know,
clearly
he'd never
change.
put it that way.
Well, obviously.
Because he believes
Okay,
he lives
okay,
under capitalism or
okay. So
whatever.
you meant subjectively, like you meant from the individual's point of view. Okay, that makes
Right,
sense.
like they'd never overtly say I'm the status quo warrior because we struck the impeccable democratic balance with the
Yeah.
laws of 2023, right? And I don't think that that's like a sign of hypocrisy. I think it's just a natural thing that
I
like,
mean,
you
it
know.
would be amazing if we lived in a world that was just so great that doggedly defending the status quo actually would be a cool thing to do. Like I would love to live in that world, but you know,
I think that a lot of fantasy things sort of set themselves up that way, you know,
right.
before they introduce their conflict. That's like a storytelling thing. So the only time that you'll see a kingdom like a thing like that is like the Mushroom Kingdom before Bowser shows up. I
Yeah.
can't imagine that the little toad people are complaining about anything. It looks like they got it all figured out.
So, yeah.
Yeah, well, I wasn't sure if Jay was gonna show up on the earlier side or if he meant that he wasn't available till later. But since we're all here, let's just play some of this video. I mean, because it is pretty short, and then yeah, and then
Right.
we can talk about one of the. We can make sure that we actually address the things that I put in the title here. Although I did keep it pretty vague. But I mean, the gist of it is, in general, I see
With
this as
watching
the
the
shitting on traditionalism
The way
from an
the way
anti-feminist perspective stream. And
yeah.
surrogacy is our crowning jewel topic. But also, I want to talk about the family values movement, quote unquote, particularly in America, and just like appreciate how many things they could have addressed, but then didn't in favor of gay marriage and abortion. Because I just, it occurred to me really recently. I'm like, damn, family values could have meant so much more. And the fact that politically it was just like the
it,
silly partisan contrived bullshit like really kind of reflects poorly on the conservative movement and suggests that when they say they're for family values,
it
essentially it boils down to an implication that brown people don't hug their children. That's kind of my hot take. That's
no
essentially,
it no if
that's to me, it's like, does that not make sense?
here's
Like,
basically
because
what
if
it
you
means.
really boil it down, it's
Whenever they
like,
say
why do you pro
family
family values?
values,
Oh,
they
because we love
basically
our kids. Okay, so no one else does.
I mean, I guess it depends which brown people.
no, but here's
If you'd
basically
said
what they're saying. They're basically saying that
if you'd said black people, then I mean, like they do have that reputation,
can
kind
you
of.
Yeah.
Yeah,
can
go on, Jay.
you guys hear me at all?
I can,
No,
yeah.
we can hear you. Yeah. I think what you have to do is when you chime
Yeah,
in,
the
just
thing
keep
I was
talking.
going
Just
to say
keep
is that
talking and
basically
don't be
when
scared about your connection because, we'll work with it.
yeah.
No, I'm sorry. I thought you were going to talk. I didn't know if you had something to say or if you were just checking on that.
Mm.
All right. Well, I'm going to
Okay, I'll
start the
do that.
video.
But usually what it seems like when people say family values, only their mothers all the time and no one else. Oh, sorry. Wait.
Well,
But aren't you gonna put the video so we can see it, every one of us?
Yeah,
just
I'm going to do that in a
on
second here.
that
Yeah.
point, this most recent crusade, and I think this speaks
You're
to
not.
what you were talking about. There was all this publicity about Mr. Beast's right-hand man, co-host, co-presenter, whatever you want to call him. I can't remember his name. But anyway, he's decided that he's transsexual and abandoned his family, although I don't know the full story about what's going on there. And the traditionalist conservative right are going on about how just the epidemic of men abandoning their families to become transsexuals kind of thing. And they seem a lot more interested in this than the legal changes to divorce, etc., family court, all the stuff that's been talked about in manosphere circles forever. which seem to me to be far more consequential to family values.
Usually, what one,
Yeah, go on. That was it, really. Yeah.
but that's because the only thing that they seem to care about when they talk about so-called, it seems to just be that children should be raised by their mothers almost exclusively, and that's the only thing that they mean by that. That's basically what I
Mm.
mean. Children should be with just the mother, and the mother should be the one being home with the kid, and only the mother, and that should be it. And
Yeah, so that's your rejection of the family values movement, which is much more charitable than mine. Mine is that it just boils down to like, I guess racism. Did we find the real racism finally? Yay. Um, I mean, no, bad, right? And then you're saying, well, yeah, but it's expressed in just pure gynocentrism, where only the mother is the parent that matters, and I think that's very fair. But yeah, actually, that is also a good point too, because like they're responding to this whole tranny thing and making it a big deal about parental abandonment when it's like, yeah, like you literally couldn't throw a dart without hitting a hypocrisy there, particularly with like no fault divorce as the obvious one. Women have been doing this forever. Or you could go the other way and try to be more positive and constructive and saying let's be nicer to men in family courts, right? Like we could do that to help more men, be active fathers in their kids' lives, right? But of course, the deafening silence there, in contrast to them like bitching about the trans menace, and like and that also ties into the whole bathroom thing, right? It's like the
Hmm.
stupidest argument ever, right? All of these like traditionalist women are just like cowering in fear at menacing trannies in bathrooms, which I'm sorry, that's based and hilarious. Like, can we like man up and like make this the
Well,
hill that feminism finally dies on, right?
depending, I don't know what the source is for this, but allegedly it's the case. I think HBR covered this, that a large percentage of women will
They use
straight
men's
up,
bathrooms.
yeah,
Yeah.
just because there's a line, like
Because
nothing.
there's a fucking line. Yeah. They're
Yeah,
like, oh, on the one hand, I might get beaten up by a menacing tranny, but on the other hand, fuck this line.
yeah. It's also just really, it's really stupid to pretend that this is like an epidemic. Like, I live in kind of a liberal metropolitan area, or at least adjacent to one, and I've literally never seen a tranny, or if I did, it was like a really well passing one that you would never suspect. These kinds of the autogynephilic transsexuals, it's like a subculture within a tiny subculture. So it's just, I don't know, that if you were concerned about sexual assault, it's one thing to be concerned about sexual assault as an issue. Why be concerned about this particular flavor of sexual assault coming from this tiny minority of the population, especially when we don't even
because it's
really,
women being victims. That's why.
yeah,
Well,
but
and because they think trannies are gross. That's the other
right.
part too.
The other thing, and it amazes me that more people don't point this out, do we even know that like, what makes people think that if you just stopped them from going into public toilets, that would actually reduce the rate of sexual assault? Like, if they have those inclinations in the first place, will they not just find other places to do it in public or wherever? Like, I would imagine sexual aggression's pretty hard coded, like most things in modern society. So, the, I mean, we don't even know if it's increased the rate of assault, if you get what I'm saying.
Yeah, well, and it even expand because the other place where people argue about it is like prisons, right? Because the idea of
Yeah.
like you let a transsexual into the women's prison, then he just goes hog wild and rapes them all. Which
Yeah,
like even that is just like,
which we're now supposed to care about, apparently.
yeah. So it's like, okay, so we don't care about any of the rape in male prisons, and we don't care about any of the lesbian rape or the prison guard rape in female prisons. But now that the trannies are a factor, now the prisons are too rapey because of probably the least rare potential category of a sexual
And all the
assault is
time.
now added. Like, oh, someone
By
else
the
is
way,
in here. Who else is here?
um, before
Oh
you
no.
No,
Oh, I'm
start,
sorry. That's my
but
presentation.
the
It's still
the thing
before,
about
going. Okay.
prison,
yeah, the thing about prison.
yeah, the thing I want to say, the thing about the prisons to get rid of the race riots, so that they wouldn't die all the time. You know about that, right?
Vaguely.
Hello?
Hello.
Sorry, wait, you're talking about race riots in prison causing a bunch of death and that gets ignored too?
Yeah. Because the reason why that gets ignored is because the only solution to that, and the prisoners have already identified that, and that is that they need to segregate the prisoners if the prisoners want to, right? But they say like, no, we can't do that because that's civil rights and stuff like that. So therefore, they don't do it. And they would rather have prisoners die than to be segregated. That's how it is. That's how retarded anti-racism is, and that's the American prison system now.
Oh, because you mean that there's like the high level of interracial violence in prison? I'm actually not even informed on this really. Um, well, because like a lot of the stats around prisons, they just like kind of give up. They're just like, wow, there's a lot of violence and rape and murder happening here. Yeah, let's just put the
It's
clipboard away. Like
it's
it's a shit
amazing.
show.
It's amazing because in theory it should be an incredibly easy problem to solve. Because if the punishment in prison is supposed to be the isolation, and I think most people who've thought about that issue seriously would agree with that, then the prisons should just bathe and take their meals and everything in their cells, and then there won't be any rape or any violence at all, really. So I don't know why that hasn't been taken seriously. And then they can just, like, of course they need exercise. Well, you can just take them out one by one at different times of day to do exercise, and then there'll be no rape, etc.
I
But
imagine that that's just logistically impossible given the physical structures of prisons and then the sheer number of prisoners would be like the major concern. Is that
yeah,
to physically feed all those people one by one, it's like you'd need like a 24-hour schedule, right? And like which frankly, if you're in prison, like forcing you to be nocturnal wouldn't really make a big difference, you know? But yeah, I think it'd be a radical kind of overhaul. I mean, there's cases where like if someone, like if people are like not quite in jail or in prison and they're like in a holding cell, right? Then things are kind of set up that way. But that's like a much smaller operation because these are usually people that they hold for like a few hours and let them go or whatever, right? Or they get bailed out or whatever. Whereas in a prison where they're like there for often years. Um, and then you
I don't know.
imagine like this is a daily schedule. These are people that need these things. And then it's like if you have a structure like that, and then like someone fucks up and like you forget it, like that could happen too, right? So there might be some negative externalities there. Whereas like just I don't know, risking the violence for letting people go off in groups at times just to be able to logistically like keep these people like fed.
Yeah, it's incredible to think that in a civilization, though, people are so tolerant of this. That is violence in prisons. Like, the whole point is that the punishment is supposed to be going to jail, not being raped or assaulted in jail. I mean, it's one thing if you're going to have corporal punishment, but then the corporal punishment should be carried out by, um, well, by the state, like
Yeah,
it
like a
is in,
professional where it's like
yeah,
standardized.
yeah, exactly.
Because otherwise
And
it's arbitrary, and then at that point you have like wildly disproportionate,
yeah,
punishments for the same stuff, etc. And that's, a
it
problem
just
for
it,
justice.
it just makes sense. And if you wanted to have a civilization instead of just being chimpanzees or worse than chimpanzees, then you would discourage this kind of thing. But nobody cares.
Isn't it wild too? Could you imagine a politician coming out and saying, "We're gonna bring corporal punishment to prisons"? They'd be like, "Wow, you're a fucking monster." And it's like, okay, but look at what you've been ignoring. You've been ignoring just chaotic, horrible violence for
Exactly.
decades and decades.
By the way, do you mind, before you play this video, do you mind just giving me a little spoiler? Because I'm curious. At any point in this video, does she talk about anything that's, like, actually disturbing? Like threats being used or extortion being used to get women into being surrogates? Or is it going to be, like, every bit as gay as I suspect it's going to be? where they're just
Yeah, don't get your hopes up. I would say that the two major points she'll make is there's a point where she talks about like the surrogacy operations in third world countries and how like it's sort of like evolving gradually into like a mass produced kind of a thing, right? Where it's like they have like a bay full of babies on standby to kind of ship out, right? Which I'm kind of sitting there like, all right, there's some fair consideration there, you know, a little bit, but not quite to the point of like
like
duress and threats and things like that. And then the other thing is becoming a surrogate and then regretting it
yeah,
as a first world white woman, obviously. No,
yeah.
that's uncharitable. I mean, she is a sympathetic to the third world women, but it's like,
Well, I
but
mean,
that comes from her perspective, you know. So
I don't know why that would make any difference either way to your attachment to the kid. Or no, I guess you're saying like I don't know, third worlders, it's more of an economic necessity for them to do stuff like that.
yeah, well, what it is like basically what she's saying is like I agreed to do the surrogacy thing and like I knew that it was going to be like weird or different to give up the baby I've been carrying, but it's not until the moment where I like hand over the baby and then I go home without it that I'm like, holy shit, like I probably made a massive mistake and I feel awful, right? And like I can kind of see how that's, you know, like that's a big like if you weren't really serious about it, or not, I guess not serious, but if you didn't give it enough serious consideration, right? If you kind of like I think that like kind of like how with women who want to get abortions, sometimes they have them do the panel where they like try to scare them into not having an abortion because they like listen to all these people who regret their abortions, right? You can kind of do the same thing with the surrogacy where it's like, okay, but like if you're really sure about this, please listen to a few women who regret doing it and how they feel and try to imagine that and like really seriously think about this because I mean, for her to like because in theory you could like violate the contract, pull out at the last moment, keep your baby, but like that's also pretty devastating to the couple that's waiting for the baby, you know. Um, so like there's considerations all around, and I can see how this adds up to like surrogacy being a complicated issue that does in fact have like you know it's not as simple as just being like yeah let's sell babies, you know. Like obviously there's considerations to be had all around. But the thing that strikes me so much about this 5 minute conversation here is there's just a general total like unwillingness to engage with solutions that would kind of make for like a reasonable regulated version of surrogacy. Instead, they're just like, I'm scared of this. This is dark. Ew, capitalism's gross. Like ban this because a white woman is crying, you know?
Yeah. Although,
Oh,
like,
so Terrence is in the chat. Hey, Terrence, good to see you again. He says, we live in a rape culture where rape is normalized and prevalent, pretty much constant, pretty much like a Mad Max movie, so we should probably focus on trans women in bathrooms. Exactly.
yeah,
And
that's
like that's why
exactly.
I can't stand the conservatives. It's their number one issue is trannies in bathrooms. Like it's
Yeah,
just a
and
cartoon.
I don't agree with Destiny on much, but this is the point he's made that literally all conservatives seem to talk about now is the trans thing all day, every day.
Yeah,
And
no,
it's
I heard him talking about that too, and I was like, you know what? I'm finding myself agreeing with Destiny on a couple of things.
yeah.
Like I despise his worldview. I think it's like horrible. But broken clocks, let's go.
Oh well.
Let's see. I got a message on Discord. Is this from Jay? Oh, it needs to be added back. Oh, sorry.
Yeah, I
All
was
right,
gonna
welcome.
mention
Bye.
that. Hello, Jay.
Yeah, well, let's play some of this. I'm gonna
Yeah,
speed it up
Hello.
too, because
right.
I
we
just
already know what they're gonna say.
I just kind of like
We can hear you okay now, or I can. I don't know. So,
Yeah, I
play
can
the
hear you
first
just fine.
comprehend.
yeah, let's just play it.
There's got to be some way he can like fudge his connection and make it better or something. I don't know. We'll see. Whatever.
They
I
don't
got
seem to be able
Diablo
to
4 to work
comprehend.
on my shit computer. I broke the Bluetooth receiver built
Did
into it by doing so, but you know. Yeah, we'll watch like I don't know the first like minute or so of this.
Slippery slopes are all around us, and we've been slipping
Oh,
on.
can we hear this? I think I muted it.
Yeah.
Oh, there we go. Wait.
is
Why
that for
is it
everyone who
mute
said
site and not
females
mute
can be adults?
tab?
That's basically what.
That's really annoying. This browser changed. You used to be able to mute individual tabs, and now you mute the whole site. So if you have two YouTube tabs open, that's fucking stupid. Okay, whatever.
On so many, and at this
Almost
point where
no
I
exceptions.
think
To have a
surrogacy
collective
You guys
IQ
can
of
hear it,
15.
right?
I can
Who
hear you.
does?
Nobody who makes
Jesus Christ, man.
Jay, your connection has never been this bad.
I
He's like
know
living in
it's
a box
terrible,
now.
but did you hear what I said?
No, something about IQ, they add up to 15.
No, I'm saying that the people who are making slippery slope arguments on the low IQ because they don't know what the fuck they're talking about, they should all shut up.
Yeah,
Yeah, I think slippery slope is a really tired accusation.
Yeah, the term, I've been thinking about this a lot lately, actually.
It's an
The term
incorrect
slippery-
classification.
Yeah. The term slippery slope is
Like it's basically like saying that. No, you first. I go afterwards.
okay. First of all, I'm not entirely sure what it means to talk about a behavior as a slippery slope. Like, just for instance, you could say that Jeffrey Dahmer's first murder was the beginning of a slippery slope. But the reason we know that is because we know now in retrospect that he went on to kill a bunch of other people. And that was true in virtue of his particular psychology and his motivations, right? It's not like the act of killing one person, it somehow just inevitably, logically follows from that act that you're going to kill however many other people. And then there's also just sort of the well, it's like, for instance, when people say if we have gay marriage or if we're tolerant towards homosexuality, then tolerance towards pedophilia is the next logical step. And I said, well, it's like it might be a logical step in the sense that one's necessary for the
Which is
other.
a
Like,
retard.
you're not likely to have a society that accepts pedophilia in a
But it's not,
society
though.
that doesn't accept homosexuality, right? But that doesn't mean one automatically just follows on from the other, if you get what it is.
You just go to Islamic countries. They accept pedophilia.
Yeah, because of course it wasn't the same people. Like,
No, I
your
get
average...
what you're saying, but if you go to many
Yeah.
Middle Eastern countries,
Yeah, or
Yeah.
you could even say that, like, you know,
Like, in
the
Middle
first
Eastern countries,
cheeseburger was your
it's
slippery
before.
slope to obesity, you know?
Yeah.
But it's like, okay, but we're gonna shit on everyone who ate a cheeseburger. That's a little bit silly.
Yeah, I mean, like, the average normie person who thinks consenting adults should be able to do whatever sexually, there's no relationship whatsoever between that and the people who believe that adults should be able to have sex with kids. It's totally different people, different psychologies, different motivations. So I don't know what it means to say that one, like, implies the other. Or, like, I heard this yesterday as well. There was a guy, a right-wing guy, who was talking about sex ed, and, like, my opinions on that are neither here nor there. And he was talking about these stories from 100 years ago where women would allegedly show up on their wedding night and literally not know what was going to happen to them because they didn't know anything about sex. Like, they'd literally just never been told anything about sex. And he then went on to say, but would that really be so bad? And if the alternative is having drag queens read to kids and teaching little kids about anal sex and blah blah blah. So, like, he sort of suggested that if you tell, well, yeah, I don't need to belabor this. You know what I'm saying, right?
Yeah, well, and honestly, even like a really basic level, you could just say the fact that you've successfully made a distinction between step A and step B, like it implies that that there's enough of a distinction to stop it, right? Like the inevitability has to challenge the distinction.
Yeah.
And oftentimes people aren't even, that's too much.
Yeah. I just
Although
thought it
Jay,
was
that is a good point that you have Islamic countries that are fine with, like child brides, but not gay stuff.
gayness. Yeah.
Yeah. Although if you ask them, they will say Muhammad did not have sex with his baby bride. He waited until she was like at least what, like 13? What is their argument? I don't know. I think it changes.
I think the arguments
I thought
tend
you
to
were
be
gonna.
that she actually
thought you
was
were.
not 9, she was much older. But
Yeah. When you
but
were talking like that, Derek, I
but
thought
but,
you were
but
going to
instead
do
they say that the interpretation is different and all that. But that's kind of like important.
I thought you were gonna say it like the Bill Clinton speech, like I did
I
not
did not.
have sexual relation. Yeah.
Oh my God, I want like an Islamic like brown version of Bill Clinton in like a clip that does the exact same thing. Oh, and that'll be the image of Muhammad, and then I'll get
Oh, I have
terrorism.
the best
Never mind, I
argument
don't
for
even
what
have that
slippery
idea.
slopes.
I didn't even think about it. Yeah.
But here I have another idea. Here's basically a retarded slippery slope argument. Sorry. Listen to this. Listen to this. If we ended, they should never have ended the transatlantic slave trade, because inevitable, if you end the transatlantic slave trades, you're gonna get white genocide. That's a slippery slope. You never say that. It's equally retarded, don't you know?
Yeah. Well,
I kind of
mean,
like that though as a
like,
devil's advocate
honestly,
position.
that's just
See, but then the problem is like a
whenever
progressive will
someone
say,
uses
yeah, you
slippery
got what
slope
you
argument, I'm gonna say
deserved.
if they believe that. If they don't believe it, they can shut the fuck up. Exactly right, and therefore they're all fucking retarded. They can all go fuck themselves. They're all fucking communist fucking retards. Like, here's the reason about anybody who opposes surrogacy is a communist retard. Zero exceptions. 100% of them, every single one of them, no exceptions.
All right, well we can see if they redeem themselves.
Yeah. If
What are you
anybody
gonna say?
really, I don't
Well, the
think
only
people.
reason you can redeem yourself is to change your mind. Otherwise, they're gonna die.
We'll see.
I don't think people appreciate just how much of the world we would have to. I don't think people appreciate just how much of the world we would have to flood with immigrants if we really took that line of reasoning fully seriously, which I don't think anybody really does, because slavery and empire building are normal human behaviors in times of zero-sum competition. And of course, that was what the world was like forever until recently. It was a zero-sum competition, basically, to exist. And, the Mongols built empires and took slaves, and the Arabs and Africans, to a certain extent, Turks, so Indians as well. You name it. So, I don't know. It just seems to be one of those things that's only ever applied to whites, and that's why people use really hardcore language like genocide, because there is just that blatant double standard. And they'll use it even against white countries that never had empires, or never had multiracial empires anyway, like Ireland and Sweden, and Jay can speak to that. Yeah.
Yeah, like, how is it the idea that they can say that, oh, all white people are bad because slavery and blah blah blah? But what the fuck does Portugal having slaves hundreds of years ago have to do with Belarusians alive today? Like, absolutely nothing. They don't even. If you want to find their common ancestors, you need to go back like long before, like almost not hundreds, but you get a long time, right? Like, you know what I'm saying? It's like, it's completely illogical. But the main reason why we brought out slavery was because to demonstrate retarded the slippery slope is.
Yeah.
And that people should stop using it, like, completely.
Yeah, so her slippery slope argument, right, is, I mean, basically the first couple minutes they talk about, obviously, like, here are some reasons why people would think surrogacy is a great idea. And they're pretty obvious reasons, people who can't have babies, they can have babies now. And also there's, like a financial or economic opportunity for someone who's like willing to provide that service, which is frankly kind of how I see it. It is providing a service, It is a service that's, it's not to be taken lightly, and it is a serious service too. But it's like if you think about that, like how big what it is services, there's all kinds of jobs you can have in service that like is actually quite like personal and is very serious and like does have serious standards regarding it. So I don't really see that this is a difference in kind so much as maybe a difference in degree, but that it's still like to just subject it to all of the same rules and ideas that you would surrounding any other kind of service. To me, that kind of just solves the problem right out of the gate. Like you can make up disaster situations, but they're kind of non-unique. Like there's disaster situations that are being neglected in all kinds of industries, and like I think this one's being singled out for reasons that are essentially just kind of based in gynocentric bigotry.
Yeah.
But yeah, we'll see because yeah, they do like a little bit of a summary kind of a thing in the beginning. So let's just, because that's 16 seconds. I'm just gonna give it like a minute or two here.
You can tell when you reach the precipice that it's like this is the direction it's going into, and we're just about there, and we're taking the first step down the slope, and it's the darkness at the bottom is essentially people ordering babies for anything.
One of the interesting things that has risen with this whole natalism conversation is a rise of surrogacy. Now you look at it on the surface, you go, okay, this is good. People who can't have kids can have kids. What's wrong with that? And then you look into it and you go, oh, this is dark.
Yeah, it's a strange thing because obviously
nothing is wrong with that.
The more kind of napkin presentation of the case for surrogacy is really nice. You have women who maybe are not of great means, but are willing to do it for kind of generously to help someone who maybe is infertile and they really want their own child, and this is the only way they can have it. It's really it kind of pulls on the heartstrings, especially for someone who knows are infertile yourself, or it's tough out there. Like I said, a lot of people are having trouble with this, and it feels like you scratch my back, I scratch yours type of situation. But I think the case for it or against it in a way is kind of a case of like virtue ethics. Like if we allow this type of activity to start, and if we allow this little edge case where it's obviously virtuous and nice, the thing is not going to stay there. We have slippery slopes are all around us, and we've been slipping on so many. And at this point, where I think surrogacy, surrogacy and cross-border commercial surrogacy is already a little bit of a strange beast, because especially now with the war in Ukraine, just kind of a lot of the uncovered was essentially that a lot of people who were evacuating were these kind of like Big Brother style houses of women who were living kind of in a cluster home, I don't know, pregnant with some Westernist baby, and they were kind of being kept in sort of observation, so that the moms and dads or whoever was ordering the baby from abroad.
Yeah, because Western countries make it illegal.
Of how the ladies were doing and stuff like that. So I don't know. It was I mean, you could see this. We're still at the beginning of this, and this is already kind of, it feels a little bit predatory, and it feels a bit predatory to interrupt and just completely like commercially sever the bond between mom and baby. I mean,
so next she'll get into kind of her own experience, but
predatory.
Right. No, exactly. And that's kind of the issue I'm seeing here. Like that's her smoking gun example, though, is that you have a country that's literally at war, and the women are selling babies to help with. Like if you think about the kinds of shit that happens in war, to me that doesn't really seem like the kind of thing that makes you pause and go, "Wow, war is hell." Like not to be totally unsympathetic, but you know what I mean? Like that's her smoking gun example, and it's kind of like, oh, there's a lot of babies in a room, kind of like in a hospital. Like maybe I'm missing something. Maybe they didn't give it enough attention, but
yeah, what's the wrong with that? Like, have she actually seen how it's like if a lot of hospitals, a lot of babies in rooms?
I mean, that room where they had the kids really didn't look that bad.
So ridiculous.
Right. It's also like, what difference would it make to the baby? Like,
it looks like the room that most people were born.
So then the other thing too is they mentioned, oh, this could lead to
like,
essentially people buying babies for anything, right? And to me, I'm kind of like, well, it seems like probably the major point of departure, right, is like, is this a baby that's being like planned for a particular couple later, right? Or is this just like, oh, I'm just gonna make a baby and then we'll find someone for it later, right? Like I think that that's something they could have gotten into and said, oh, like we should make sure that these kinds of surrogacy arrangements are from start to finish, set on the tracks, and that we're checking in and that we're being responsible about it. Yeah, the idea that you kind of like pre-make a bunch of babies and then cross your fingers that you'll find someone to sell them to. Like, obviously, that's where I'd be a little bit like, okay, let's not have that happen, because that seems a little bit disastrous. And I could definitely see that
I mean,
like developing to a degree, right?
If it was happening in the West, the worst case scenario is that they would end up in an orphanage or something. Or like, I don't know, do we even use that term anymore? Like in the foster care system.
Until a white couple want to buy them.
Yeah, and how is that different from a woman deciding that she doesn't want her own baby and then putting it up for adoption, I guess?
Yeah.
So maybe that is part of the problem. Because if you have adoption available, then therefore the woman can just produce the baby with the intention of eventually finding someone to sell it to, and then just hop it off to the adoption orphanage, once if she can't find someone, then just like mulligan, because it'll be easier to sell a new baby,
But I have to.
Yep.
Yeah, but I have to add that there is literally no way a healthy white baby is going to be in an orphanage for long. Sorry, that's just not gonna happen. Somebody's gonna get it. It's
gonna snag it up.
Sorry, it's just not gonna happen if you think about it logistically, right? But I have to say, I have to ask a question. I have to ask a question, right? Because the only reason why I know that this is just gynocentric bigotry, right? Because usually.
Oh, you're cutting out now.
When you
we heard a little bit there.
talk about surrogacy arrangement, it is that. Did you hear that?
No, we heard about 5 seconds of silence and then the surrogacy arrangement.
Should we just finish the video?
Maybe type it into the chat.
Yeah,
and then we'll
that I have a.
Just type it.
Them buying her kid.
I do think the other argument, though, that you said before makes a lot of sense, though. That, yeah, they're always looking for babies. Although the issue, though, is if this gets popularized enough, in theory, you flood that market. But, I mean, who knows what that threshold is, really.
Yeah, I mean, it seems like the demand for babies is quite high. I'm struggling to imagine a situation where they've got all these babies and they're genuinely like, oh, nobody is going to take them. Especially if their clientele is international, the entire world, not just their local area. Seems kind of implausible. If you get what I'm saying.
Part of the issue, I guess, becomes in following up to make sure that they're being sold to real parents, right? That they have to prove they still have the baby and it's the same one, right? And that the kid just didn't disappear or whatever.
Right. Yeah.
I can see how that complicates things because things are complicated enough even in the status quo. But
if
I just have to ask, if a woman is buying sperm from a sperm bank, is she then buying a kid, even though it's biologically hers?
Biologically hers.
She's buying the crafting materials necessary to make the baby herself.
Yeah.
Exactly right. But why? So how is that different? From a man ordering a surrogacy to have a kid that is biologically his. It's not. It's just the sex is different, right? So why the fuck are one saying that a mother who is using her wealth or her money to get the resources necessary to have a kid, why doesn't they say she's buying a baby? But if a man did the exact same thing, they say he's buying a kid. They're saying that kids are naturally belong to their mothers and don't belong to the fathers. They are saying that without knowing that, just right?
I think emotionally there is a difference because when a man donates sperm, the only thing he's losing is sperm, whereas when a woman becomes a surrogate, she's giving away a baby. So there's the emotional bond attachment thingy.
Well, that's just emotional. It's not like a logistic difference.
True.
Well, okay, but there is a logistic difference.
Is the accusation.
Yeah.
Like, so the reason I don't like this
Yeah, but the thing I'm
comparison is because we don't have artificial uteri, right? So if we're talking about using the female half of what's necessary for producing a baby, it is currently a physical bodily structure inside of a real person, whereas like the sperm isn't. The sperm is just, like it's very easily separable. I think the moment you have perfect artificial uteri technology, then yeah, then we can kind of see that as like a perfectly more symmetrical kind of a thing, you know. But because we have that technological limitation, I think there is some room for like absolutely like the surrogates should be like compensated more, and like the market reflects that, and that makes perfect sense.
Well, obviously there should be. Yeah,
Yeah, and that compensation
there is no
reflects the
doubt about
emotional
that
labor
anyhow, but that was
too.
really the point I was trying to make.
Emotional labor.
Yeah, exactly. But my point is, here's basically my point. My point is
I know, right? I said it unironically. Can you even
my
believe
point
that?
is that if no, yeah, I can't. But my point is that if you have a person, a child being born, right, then the child is actually it's already the kid of both their parents, right? It is the father's kid and the mother's kid, right? So how the fuck can one say that a woman, like if a woman and have a kid and a man have a kid, right? They are going to have to spend money in some ways in order to get their kid, right? So why the fuck are they saying that a mother is not buying her kids when they say a father is buying his kids? Like what? That's just like, if you're a father, you buy your kids because you spent money to get them, honestly. And if you did, then wouldn't women also have done that altogether? And you just did it cheaper, you know what I'm saying? Like there's no like, that's what I'm trying to get at. Like my point is that is the presumption that you don't think that kids belong to, is that people don't think the kids belong to the fathers as much as they belong to the mothers, which is just based in genocentric bigotry and nothing else.
I don't think it's only based on that,
Because
though. Like, it's mostly based on that, but the issue is that we don't have artificial uteri, whereas, like, we do have artificial insemination. If it was the case that, like, you couldn't use any sort of technology to, like, store or buy or sell sperm or to artificially inseminate, and, like, literally, like, it had to be done naturally, right, then it would be a closer comparison, But even then, it's a little bit, it's compared to carrying a baby around for 9 months,
yeah,
But you get what I mean, right? Like if we had the artificial uteri, then your point
yeah, but
makes more sense, right? Like, doesn't that not make sense? If we had artificial uteri, then your comparison makes a lot more sense and is way more equal. And the difference between a woman naturally carrying a baby around versus sticking it in like an egg that, like, I don't know, like you keep it in the quarter and like you rub it every once in a while to make sure it gets human contact so it's not a psychopath. Right. You see, like the reason we think artificial uteri is such a great technology
the
is because
point.
it would make a massive difference. I don't know. You don't think that makes a difference at all? Like the effort and the labor and everything involved with like physically carrying around the baby and giving birth to it, and that compares a little bit more extremely to like jacking off into a cup and then selling it for $50 or whatever. Like, right? You know, like I'm not saying that you're totally wrong on it. I'm just saying that like that's the key difference here, which is why and the market already solves this, right? Because you just look at how much a woman gets paid for being a surrogate versus what a man will get paid for donating sperm. And like the market's factored in, supply and demand, which is going to factor in things like I'm really sad that I'm birthing a baby and giving it away. Which is why capitalism is
No,
amazing. Like we literally just
see
put a
that, but
dollar amount
that's
on
not the
that.
point. Yeah, but that's not the point I'm making. My point I'm making is that kids is equally their mother's kids as it is their father's kids. That's what I'm saying, right? That's the only point I'm making, right? So if a kid is it's a man's biological kids or a woman's biological kids, then that's the same
Oh,
thing.
okay.
There is
Yeah,
no
I get what you're saying. I get what you're saying. So what you mean is that like for the
one
woman to then assert a
of the
biological
kid and
right in a
not the other.
surrogacy arrangement, it's like a sperm donor like having regret and then asserting a right later on. I don't know if that's
Yeah,
like a separate point, but I think that I think there's some sense to
that's
that. Yeah.
not the point. I'm also not. Yeah, that's true. That's true. But that's not the point I'm making. The point I'm making is that kids are the father's kids just as they are their mother's kids, right? So when you have a kid, right? If it's your biological kids, right? Then there is no way you can technically say that you bought your kids, because if they're biologically yours, then they already belong to you because they're your kids, right? Um, that's what I'm making, right? So if I have a kid as my biological kid, then it's no way that I could have gotten, then it's mine. That's my point I'm making. It's not that I made it to become mine. It wasn't that it wasn't mine and then became mine. It was always mine, right? It's like if a woman has a biological kid, it's always hers. It didn't become hers. It is always hers. That's what I'm trying to say. Do you get what I'm saying?
Right.
Yeah.
So if you define it based on the biological contributions.
No, the biological genetic makeup is that it is the father's kid just as it is the mother's kid, right?
I
So
mean, I think
if somebody's
I think
saying that he must have been a kid, then they're saying that it wasn't originally his, but it was though. Because
Oh,
if it's
I
his
see what you're saying,
biological
right?
kid,
Because
it's
if
her
both the
biological kid,
sperm
it's
and the
there.
egg
It's his,
come
and then it's
from
hers.
the couple, and then the surrogacy's just doing only the surrogacy, right? Because I'm sure there are some situations where, like, the woman just carries the baby and there's not an egg, and they just use the surrogate's egg, right? Which, you know, obviously that's different. But yeah, but if you're looking at situations which, is that the more common way then? The more common way would, I think, be, right, that they contribute both the sperm and the egg, and then the third party is growing something that's genetically alien.
on a lighter note,
Yeah,
kind
exactly right.
of.
But and also elaborating on this, I just have to finish, and that is that if you're a woman and you have a biological kid that's genetically yours, then that kid didn't become yours after it was born. It was always yours. It's like if you're a man and yours, right? So if they're saying that somebody bought a kid, right, and they're saying that that kid existed before being the father's kid, when no, that's not true, because they know woman bought her kid before after it existed, right? You know what I'm saying? Like that's not how it works. Like you can't buy your own kids because they're already yours. Like you understand what I'm saying? That if it's already yours, you can't buy it. If
Yeah,
it's
no,
not
that makes
yours,
perfect sense.
yeah,
Yeah, because I wasn't thinking through everything. So yeah, I see what you're saying. Like if it's that's where it's all come from and made up from, then it's a change in address, not a change in property, really. I mean, property is kind of the wrong term, but
No, exactly right.
Terrence has a funny comment
Like
here. Maybe you
no,
could genetically
yeah,
engineer an
I get the
animal
point.
to be a surrogate to human babies. Like, so that's a very fascinating idea that I'd never thought of. But
Yeah,
that's kind of weird though.
that's an interesting,
Well,
mildly
it's not really a
disturbing idea.
problem.
Could you imagine your baby
But
comes
like,
out of a goat? I don't know why I assumed it would be
oh,
a
that's
goat.
crazy.
Probably because it seems satanic. I don't know.
I heard it's a lighter note and I guess also kind of a dark note.
No, I think it's because it would piss off the.
For God's sake.
I think he has like a 3-second delay
No pun.
also, which is part of it. So
I'm
what were you
sorry.
saying?
I'm sorry for laughing at it.
No, this is just love. It's funny, dude. It's fine. It's like I want to laugh too, but at least I'm made
Yeah, Jay Willie, I think
it
you're
so
just
that
gonna
they
have to
understand what I
type
was trying to
in
say.
chats, and I'll read them. I'll keep an eye and make sure I read them. But it's just, I mean, if you can hear back to this, you'll see how it's like there's just massive sounds, and then we're sitting here, we're not sure if you get cut off because like you could have finished and then got cut off, and then we just wait and we're not sure. But then also I think there's a delay, so then you're not sure exactly when we're talking either. So Like I said, it is the worst it's ever been. I'm not exaggerating. I wonder if there's like a VPN you can use. Sometimes that makes your internet a little bit faster if you find one that does something like that. Um, but now I can't get over like what would be the most plausible animal to use as the artificial uterus, because it kind of makes sense, right? Like, why invent a whole robot uterus if there's an animal that works?
Either chimpanzees or pigs.
I was gonna say, I think pigs are on the table.
Yeah.
Could you imagine? I'm just trying to think of like how every single group of political ideologues would react to this in their various forms of disgust, and just how wild that conversation would be.
Mm.
Because like animal
Do you
rights
mind
people
if
would
I
get
explain
super
why
pissed
opposition to
off.
surrogacy is also racist?
Sure, okay. Yes.
That surrogacy is a reproductive method. People have low birth rates, right? Um, and therefore, if you block surrogacy, you want to reduce the birth rates, which makes it genocidal. So it's racist to oppose surrogacy.
I think that's a
trying to
stretch.
eradicate that are now of the same ethnicity as me. 100% of them are racist and also sexist. Zero exceptions.
So then would the argument be that people who go for surrogacy are going to be like disproportionately white?
No, that's
Like
not the
I could
argument
see
at all.
that
I'm saying that
they'd
if
be
I want to do it,
disproportionately like rich.
yeah, which means disproportionately white nation. But that's not what I'm trying to say. That's actually not what I'm saying. What I'm saying is that if I'm come from an ethnicity, right, whose birth rate is not above replacement levels, right, then reducing my capability to reproduce it is racist because they are doing because then they want to block our already low birth rates from increasing slightly, and that makes it racist. Don't you see what I'm getting with?
The trouble
Oh,
is
so
a
you're
lot
saying there's a
of,
special
like,
consideration for groups that have low birth rates.
the trouble is, like, when you say groups that have low birth rates, that's practically the entire world now. Even Saudi Arabia is below
Not
replacement now. The only place
exactly,
that
which makes
isn't
everybody
is
opposed it's racist.
right. Okay,
But then
yeah,
it's not, then it's
That's
just racist against everyone.
yeah,
No.
which
Here's the
seems
reason why.
odd.
Here's the reason why it's racist. I can say why it's racist. If somebody has a different ethnicity than me, right? They're racially different from me, right? And if they don't want to do it because they are like a straight woman or whatever, fucking retard. And they have the privilege to do whatever they want with their life, right? And they're from a different people, right? They have their kids, and they want to prevent me from having mine, and have a different race than they would have, right? And therefore, if they want to prevent me from breeding as much as they already do, then they are wanting someone of a different ethnicity to not have a kid, and that is always racist. That's what I'm saying. Depends on who makes the argument.
Interesting.
I mean, I guess like in consequences, maybe.
Do you want to like
And
play
it's
the rest
also
of the video?
sexist, but I've already explained why it's sexist.
Yeah.
Yeah, let's go
Yeah.
ahead and finish out the video here because there's 2 minutes left here, and I have it at 1.5, so that'll be over pretty quick here.
I've had a baby. I'm gonna have one again very soon, and it's the idea that in the hospital, even though if I signed the contract before, obviously I consented to this previously without knowing how I'd feel when the baby arrived. I would just have to give the baby just hand it over and say, "Sayonara, I'm gonna go home now." So yeah, there's also a lot of physical cost involved. Yeah, it's recovering from pregnancy is not always easy. There's risks that are really hard to calculate in advance as well in terms of the impact on your health. Some women end up having like stress fractures, uterine ruptures, all sorts of things that just happen in the course of not being pregnant. Might lead to infertility for themselves afterwards. So yeah, I mean, obviously, if someone's more of a libertarian bent, they say, okay, you put this in the disclaimer, put it in the contract. Obviously, let them know that this, side effects might include this, and this. But I think when it comes to something so profound as the bond between child and mother, I don't think your body knows that, oh, this is someone else's egg, and this is some, third-party sperm, and this is it's a strange, it's a different situation. But yeah, it just feels like one of those slopes that it's you can tell when you reach the precipice that it's like this is the direction it's going into, and we're just about there, and we're taking the first step down the slope, and it's the darkness at the bottom is essentially people ordering babies for anything.
Well, it comes back to the point you were making about the market. It's like, what is the commodity that's being traded in that exchange? And it starts to get a little bit creepy very quickly. And then Francis says, once you look into it, then it sort of starts to make sense a little bit.
I mean, I just think,
the thing being traded is the service. It's not a commodity. It's a service.
And I imagine I'm going to be pretty much preaching to the choir here, but I just think that this attitude is really low grade. This is the kind of thing that feminists and traditionalists both seem to think is quite profound and quite whoa. But it's so not. It's so because if a man is engaged in any kind of behavior that carries risk, physically, psychologically, in any way you could care to name, selling himself into slavery or whatever, most people's thought process is, okay, he either understands the risks and he's gone ahead with it, in which case, oh well, or he doesn't understand the risks, in which case he'll soon find out and he won't do it again. And that's the end of it. It doesn't warrant thousands of hours of public conversation. Sorry to always bring it back to sex differences, but that's the standard we expect of men. So I don't know. Yeah.
Yeah, no, because when they mention, put it in the contract, then they all chuckle, and it's I'm sorry, is that not a good solution? Is that should it not be in the contract? Is it a bad idea?
Yeah.
It is not bad. The reason why they chuckle is because they don't have any point, because they're retarded. Well, if you have a problem with somebody having what they're literally saying is that if you have a surrogacy, that's literally just it's because you're taking somebody who is not related to your kid, looking after your kids for a long time period until you can have it, right? And the kid is already yours. So if they say it's not already yours, and they're saying that kids aren't the father's kids by virtue of this being his biological children, which is just extreme sexist garbage, right, and nothing else. And if they have a problem with you being a babysitter because you're exchanging a service that you're buying for, right? Because you can't buy a kid that's already yours because it's your biological kid, right? Then they have a problem with somebody being employed for and at a profit motive being involved in employment, and that's that's just communist garbage, honestly. There's really no way around that. If you're a problem with someone being employed to do a job because that's exploitation and that's just because it's a profit motive, then that's just communist talking point. Isn't it obvious?
And if one person regrets being in their contract, does that mean that kind of contract should be illegal for everybody else who was fine with it and engaged with it, right? Why does her complaint outweigh countless people who would just provide the service and take a handsome amount of money and then have a nice life,
That's because she's that's because in one video explained to that so many people just consider women to be overgrown, retarded children rather than adults.
And the way that they're treated, that's the identical treatment, and that's what she's asking for. She's saying, well, yeah, and that's why I think that the solution of have some regret surrogate women, put together a presentation, and then advise that women who want to go through with this watch that, because there's a great incentive to do that sort of a thing, to discourage surrogates who aren't going to be serious about it, because you don't want them getting cold feet halfway or whatever. It's the kind of thing where you do need a serious commitment, and therefore it incentivizes kind of front loading some of the nightmares or the horror stories, you know. But like she's not going down that route really at all. The closest they went down to was saying, what if it was a
No,
paragraph in a
I feel
contract I didn't read? You know, and it's like, well, why not go into like ways to really make sure that they understand and are thinking about the impact and the emotional
who the fuck signs
considerations of
color? They
this, you
don't.
know? I do. It's too hard. It's too many words. I don't give a shit. I mean, if it was something important, I would. But
But
it's like,
I
what,
think
like
I
a cell
think it's
phone
just
contract?
because
Like, who
they
cares?
basically.
You know? Or they're like, oh,
Yeah,
we're
but they're not
renewing
a
your
cell phone
lease,
contract
and it's
though.
like
There's like
only
a
one
contract
thing changed.
about
I didn't read the rest.
about
Who cares?
keeping another person. It literally contracts about looking after another person's child for over half a year, for money, right?
Yeah, so they're babysitters, basically. Surrogacy is just extreme babysitting.
That isn't yours, right? Right, if a babysitter, right? You let's say Becky gonna watch your kids, right? And then you basically say in the contract
I'm back. Did anything exciting happen?
little contract. Do you think she's gonna like? What do you mean? It's gonna happen to Becky? If this woman literally in this sophistic retardation of fucking refusing to accept that women are adults, even though it's literally in the fucking definition of woman.
Yeah, you cut out for most of that, but I think, you know, that's kind of the gist of the point that we're kind of on here, right? Is like if engaging in contracts where you provide a service for money is like kind of a standard part of like adult rights and associated responsibilities, just like saying, oh well, a woman, you know, is crying, so we need to not have contracts anymore or whatever.
Yeah.
Jay Willie was not
Yeah,
planted to disrupt the stream.
we shouldn't punish
His
Becky
internet is
for.
just shit. But yeah, Jay, no, we're trying to kind of pause and wait for your connection to go through, but you'll hear it later if you listen back to this. Like probably like somewhere between 30 to 70% of everything you say like gets cut out, and then there's often pauses that are like a few seconds, and we have no idea. So you should type things into chat because then we can read them and then we know we don't miss anything. And then maybe figure out if there's a way to get a more reliable
Okay.
connection in the future.
But yeah, I mean,
You
we
use the
expect-
summary. The only way you can say that this is surrogacy. Like surrogacy is just babysitting, right? Because you can't buy a kid that is already biologically yours because it already belonged to you, unless you are such a sexist that you believe that kids only belong to their mothers and not their fathers, which is like what people are thinking.
Right,
when
that
they're
is like
saying
the
honestly. They
standard
just don't know about it yet.
attitude. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah,
and I
actually,
think
that was
is
what you missed. I
horrible,
said
and I think
surrogacy is
that-
extreme
that-
babysitting. It's a really helpful comparison, I think. I think it solves most of these conundrums.
because you aren't buy because you can't buy kids if they're already yours. Like that's because if they're biological, they are yours for default unless you decide to give them up. And if I have a woman pregnant, I didn't give up my kid because I had a woman pregnant, right? Well, I might have, but that I wouldn't do that if I had a surrogacy, if that makes sense.
Well, and even so, adoption is
I have it
already
by
pretty
default.
damn
If I do
close to
that, I
just
would
straight
do
up
it.
buying kids too.
Right, but it is like further away from that because they're already yours. And if they're gonna say, "Well, oh, you paid someone to make a kid for you," yeah, basically every fucking marriage is somebody paying someone else to make a kid for them and provide for them. There's literally no other. That's just marriage. Period. Right. So if you have a problem with surrogacy, then why don't you go full cum? It's not a problem with marriage too, because it's technically kind of like the same thing. You're paying somebody to reproduce with you.
Yeah, and
That
I
is
think
what
a lot
marriage
of
is. That's what surrogacy is. This is what sperm donations are. That's all. That's
it actually goes back to something that sometimes me and Ashley find ourselves chatting about, which is like what does a traditionalist say actually is the feminine gender role, right? Or like if we have complementarianism, right? Well, like what let's really flesh that out, right? Yeah, and it it does seem like it boils down to masculine is just a stand-in for that which is good, and then feminine is a stand-in for that which is bad. But like nobody's just willing to acknowledge that we kind of already transitioned toward the adult gender role and the child gender role. But if we call things by their proper names, a lot of women are going to be upset. Is kind of like the standstill we're in. That's kind of my read of it, anyway.
But like, have you noticed that if they can't hold women, acknowledgeable for contract, if they think that woman sign a contract doesn't matter, then they can't really say what a woman is, because as a woman is an adult human, it's a human female. Like, it's kind of like in the definition of a woman is that you are an adult. Like, you can't be a woman if you're not an adult, right? So I mean, like, that's kind of like equally important of being a woman than to be a female, you know?
Yeah.
Like, they aren't really much more consistent than the trans activists who say that, oh, you can be a male and a woman. No, you can't. Like, how is it that, but they don't believe women are adults. So how are they different? Like, adult is just much a part of being a woman as a female is.
I mean, I think the overarching point is just that we allow men to take their own risks and to sign any number of contracts that could have damaging implications for them physically or mentally. And we presume that they're going to have the cognitive power to take their own risks to decide whether or not it's worth it for them. And aside from just making sure that the terms of the contract are clear, which I guess if you put it to people, obviously it's something they care about, but beyond that, no one cares about men who are aggrieved by the consequences of the contract they chose to go into, even if you finesse it and say that they didn't fully understand what they were getting into. I mean, like I said, obviously, you should understand what you're getting into, but beyond that, it just seems like you're either an adult or you're not. And I don't see how it's fundamentally different from, I don't know, the choice to do a really scary job, like being a deep sea welder or something, which is something people do that can kill you. Well, it can quite easily kill you, but they're willing to do it for the money. It's worth the risk. And maybe it's worth the risk for these third world women. And for other reasons, I don't know. Like, I can't speak to the psychology of it, but I don't know what the fundamental difference is. It's just like, well,
Like,
yeah, go on.
I can actually, it's actually quite simple to say the only reason why there are so many so-called third world women is only because retarded first world countries ban surrogacy so that they force people to go to other countries to do it, because you can't do it in your own country, therefore you go somewhere else to do it. So if they really care and being so-called exploited, right? If they actually really was true to this, they should just say, "Oh, we need to do it here so that it's not going to be exploited," right? But they don't say that. They just say, "Oh, it's always bad, so ban it completely," right? And I'm like, okay, but then you're going to keep having other countries then. Like, that's the reason why they are the catalyst for their own issue, which isn't really an issue, but you know.
Yeah. I wanted to comment on what Derek was saying about gender and virtue. It's interesting. You'll hear people say things like, I don't know, strength and agency and attractiveness and this and that are masculine virtues. Masculine. that part is special. And I think that's true in a kind of mundane descriptive way. It's true in the mundane kind of psychological way that men are attracted to those values and like to measure themselves by those values, and that others measure them by those values. So it's just a kind of descriptive fact. It's not moral in any way. But I don't think it's a normative proposition. Like, I wouldn't say that those qualities are good in a distinctively manly way. I would say that they're just good. It's just the good. There's no reason it wouldn't be good for women to have those qualities: strength, physical and mental, etc., like any number of other character traits that people normally associate with men. And there are people who like to do this. They treat the concept of virtue as if it has this implicit sort of indexical element to it. And the term indexical is a term from philosophy which means where the truth value of a proposition can vary depending on the speaker or the user. For instance, like the sentence "I'm Ashley" could be true for me and true for Spacepan, not true for Spacepan. But when it comes to morality, when it comes to what the good is, I've come round to thinking that I just don't think I have that. I don't think I have that. Like this notion of something being good for a member of a certain, if a member of a certain class of people does it, like men or white people or whoever, but then neutral or bad when a person from a member of a different class does it, or whatever. Like the idea that there are a different moral connotations depending on which group you belong to. I just don't think I have that. And that has interesting.
I don't have that either.
Yeah. And it's like I honestly think the reason this is done partially is just as a kind of cope. Like I remember Gavin McInnes saying something like this. He was talking about how a certain demographic group in America is more violent, and he was saying that fights to the death. Okay, this is what he said. He said fighting to the death should be legal for South Floridian blacks. I don't know what's special about them in particular, but illegal for whites. Sort of the implication being that it's not okay for a white person to do it. It's okay for them to do it, for the South Floridian blacks to do it. But I'll bet if you put it to them, okay, but what if they just stopped doing it? What if you just worked some magic and they stopped being violent? Is that then bad? And of course, that doesn't make sense. Like, I can understand, I've just remembered what I was going to say before. I can understand this concept of indexicality with regard to virtue in a kind of very contextually specific and conditioned way about like individual acts. Like, for instance, maybe I'm not the best person to tell you something, like some kind of harsh truth at this particular moment. And, you know, somebody says, well, maybe you're not the right person to say that to him. Maybe his mum should tell him that, or someone that's closer to him. But the overarching character trait, which I guess you would call like honesty or something, that's governing that, that doesn't have an indexical element to it. It doesn't matter whether I'm honest or whether a woman's honest or a white person or a black person. It's just good. And that's kind of how I feel about character traits in general. That's kind of my view of it. It's like my concept of the good sort of implicitly has this element of universality baked into it. And if you're talking about something else, if you're talking about how something's good for men, but it doesn't matter to women, and vice versa, I just don't really understand that. So, and I mean, I think in the ideal world, if see, this is the world that people pretend that we live in, right? We have these manly virtues like strength, courage, intelligence, and honor, adhering to a strict moral code, and this and that. Like Jack Donovan's kind of taxonomy of tactical virtues. And you're supposed to imagine that there's some parallel feminine set of virtues that are equally expected of women and are equally important to society. But like I said, in my head, because it's either it's good or it's not, then if that were the case, and it's not, which I'll get to in a second, then you could just say, okay, the manly virtues are good, the feminine virtues are good. Why don't we just expect all of them, of all people, men, women, children, and have an optimally excellent kind of Ubermensch ideal civilization, and that would be great. But then you run into problems because the female side of that is basically kind of non-existent. Like, it reminds me of this story of, I knew a guy who my brother tells me about this guy who's like a cross-dresser or something in a really rough area filled with chavs and low-class people who don't take
Why is he
kindly to homosexuals and transsexuals. But like, here's the interesting thing. He'll say, oh, he was actually really strong and
dressing there?
courageous. Yeah. So and he'll sort of go out of his way to emphasize, well, oh, he had to have these sort of manly character traits to get himself by in a situation like that and in an environment like that, even though he was kind of a fag. And I was just thinking, well, okay, if it were the case that there was an equal set of feminine virtues, you wouldn't need, this is the thing, like, you wouldn't need to kind of shrink away in embarrassment if you said that you're a man who acts like a woman or has a feminine character. You wouldn't need to reassure people, oh no, I'm actually manly in X, Y, and Z ways. You could just say, okay, so and so is a man and he acts like a woman, but that's actually a good thing. There's nothing wrong with that because he has these awesome character traits that are associated with the feminine. But the problem is that that doesn't exist. I mean, I know that sounds very kind of scary to
No,
people.
I actually think it kind of does exist.
Yeah.
Or you can
What
finish,
would
but
you
then
what
I
would
can
you
say why
name
it
them?
exists if
What's the feminine half of the virtues though, right? Because it's kind of like you get archaic, and then you're like, I guess chastity was one of them, and then anything else is kind of like, well, these feel gender neutral.
Yeah. I mean, what
Like,
I
I guess
think
instead
we
of
should
like
do,
attractives, you could say like beauty,
Well,
but like
actually,
but
Yeah.
in an archaic sense, you would apply beauty to males also, so that's not very satisfying either.
I mean, what I think we should do is we should just, and we've talked about this too, we can say, well, let's just construct some. Let's construct a parallel set of feminine virtues. Keep the traditional manly ones: strength, courage, mastery, honor, bravery, etc. And then we can just expect all of those, the masculine and the feminine, of everybody. And I don't really see what could be objectionable about that,
I
if you see
I
what I'm saying.
It would just be the distinction, right? Because then at that point, I'd say, well, let's just make them all gender
see
neutral.
what can be objection about that. Because
Yeah, well,
if you do,
because at
and
that
what we
point,
see with the video,
yeah.
they cannot treat women as adults because they don't consider women to be adults because that woman and many other women say like, no, I don't want to be a full person. I want to be like a child. I don't want responsibilities because, as we read with the video, if anybody opposes surrogacy, well, you know what they're saying? They're saying that no, women, because they're women, should not have the rights and as an adult human being, because if you can't enter contract and be held to your own choices that you voluntarily agree to, then you are. And if many countries of women want to become surrogacies but they can't because it's not legal, then they are actually these countries are telling women, because they right, that you specifically cannot enter a legal contract as an adult because you're female, because they don't think women should be adult.
Yeah.
They don't think.
Yeah,
Well,
but
literally,
that's only
they
when
just
the
think treat
responsibility
them as
half of
women.
things drop. You know, they don't look at it that way in terms of rights or in terms of like status or anything
No,
else besides when when the responsibility kicks in, right? So they won't agree, right? So to how you're characterizing it, you know. So it's almost like
no,
to
but that's
point out the
because
hypocrisy. It's like, yeah, you're right, but you know.
But yeah, that was I know I was talking for a long time. Like, did you have any other thoughts on that, Derek? I imagine you're
I had.
basically on the same page at this
Oh,
point.
sorry.
Yeah, well, because what I'm thinking about, right, is
I guess that,
like if you really try to go back in time to like super duper times of needing sexual dimorphism for pragmatic purposes, that's where then I can see how it's like, oh yeah, well, we're respect, right? It's sort of like our society will have an existential threat if we're not sensitive to these sexual differences and in assigning roles. However, it just seems like that's always been a kind of a like a thin distinction, like even in like the oldest, most traditional context, right? Like really it's pretty much pushing out babies is the one thing, and then yeah, pre-industrialization there's more of an emphasis on physical strength, right? But post-industrialism, that's where it becomes this case where it's like, yeah, like why would we even make these distinctions, and why wouldn't we just demand things that are virtuous from everyone? And I think that really, yeah, if you do press that question to people, ultimately they're just going to be resisting the proposition of having to hold women to the responsibilities, right? That are implied by saying these are virtues you should have also. Because like with
Yeah,
your
I
example
think
of the tranny walking down the street, well, you could also like where I thought you were going to go with it was like, yeah, like why don't we imagine that for women walking down the street and carrying themselves with some strength is a virtue, and that helps them protect themselves too, you know?
yes, yeah. Well, I agree with that, yeah. And at that point, I guess it's like, what's the point in even
no,
making
they
the
would rather
distinction
have a
between?
curfew for the 99% of innocent men instead.
And at that
Yeah,
point,
right.
what's if you do get to that point,
Well,
then I
I
guess your
guess you
point
one
is
can say that.
what's even the point in making the distinction between masculine and feminine then in that case? Because then it just becomes the good, right? The universal good. And that is basically where I'm at. I agree. Yeah. So yeah.
Yeah, but what I'm trying to want to say is that masculine and feminine is actually quite simple terms to explain. Masculine traits are used traits more common in males, and feminine traits are used traits more common in females.
Right, yeah, but that's not what I'm talking about. I agree that in like a mundane descriptive way, like I
No, I
prefaced
know
my
you're talking
whole
about virtues associated
yeah,
with masculinity and
yeah.
femininity.
Yeah, I premised my whole shtick with this that like, yeah, it's okay. I don't mind using the term
Yeah, I know that. I
masculine
just
and
wanted to
yeah,
explain what feminine
yeah,
was.
yeah. Okay.
Yeah, because otherwise then we would just say, oh, well, men are acting like men by definition, and women are acting like women by definition. Then we dust our hands off and say, we solved the problem
Yeah.
by just defining our current behaviors as virtuous.
But to your point though, like when you were saying people are just resisting imposing those responsibilities, it's kind of like you're saying what I was saying about how it's like basically just a cope. Like when Gavin McInnes says that it's okay for black people to beat the shit out of each other as a way of resolving disputes. I don't think he's really saying it's good, like he values that. I think what he's really saying is, oh well, that's just the way they are. You can't change them. It's just the way it is. We just have to accept it. It's like a kind of defeatism. And really, if he could just snap his fingers and they started behaving differently, he would actually value that. And I think it's the same thing going on in the intersexual dynamics, which I guess is what you were speaking to. It's the same thing.
Yeah, well, and I can't imagine like Gavin McInnes that's like his. Like, I imagine that's kind of like a bit of a like a spicy rhetoric, right? To kind of make a larger point. But I think yeah, that probably is the larger point he's trying to say. Where, I mean, you could argue that it's like that style of resolution
To add,
is more suited to people who tend to have that difference, right? Um, and then I wonder though if saying, well, if you had the magical power to just end the behavior, I don't know, like I mean, sure, right? But then does that actually imply that like in reality that there's not a practical argument for different standards? And just to be clear, I mean, I think it sounds fucking ridiculous, like the particular example, but it's a great example because that sure is vivid. You know, it's we're not having any confusion about what kinds of thing would constitute like a radically different standard based on some immutable characteristic, you know?
Yeah.
Um,
Well,
because
yeah,
for
that's
example,
yeah.
like let's say you have like certain ethnicities or races that are like really, really prone to like addiction or something, and then therefore you have like a different standard in regards to like alcohol or something for them.
Yeah, I
Or
think
in or inverse, you have like extra special privileges to people who aren't at risk.
right. Assuming that there's no way you can change it. Right.
Right.
And I think you're getting a bit hung up on the specifics of the example. It's
Yeah,
like
a little bit.
it's
I
more
haven't heard
just
that before. It's like shocking. That's like that's I mean it's funny. It's like
yeah.
humorous, but it's like
It's
ridiculous.
structurally it's very similar to this though, was the point I was making. Because it's like because pragmatically, and I'm not endorsing this, this is just like a hypothetical person argument, but you could say, well, pragmatically, women are just going to make babies and that's all they amount to and that's it and that's all we need to expect of them. Whereas I'm just saying, well, given the exigencies of the modern world, which I guess you were just talking about, why not be ambitious? Why not be idealistic? Unless you think it's impossible for any change to be made. And if you think it's impossible, then obviously there's no point, but we don't actually know. It's an open question. So why not be idealistic? And I think that's kind of where I am at the minute.
Yeah, no, that makes sense.
But
Yeah.
like the point I was trying to make, but didn't work because of my connection, was that if a man wants to do the feminine virtue, right, and that is to just be at home with your kids, right, and not bother with work, right, then so many people in society said like, no, 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 that's bad. That's only good if women do it and not if men do it, because if you like something that women like, then that's bad because it's reserved to the privileged class of people, right, which is women. Um, so that's the reason why people, they say if they oppose surrogacy, then they're saying that men cannot assume the feminine virtues, which is taking care of kids, because they're saying that no, you can't have raise kids without the women because that's the woman's job. Because you never hear people say you can't raise. You do hear it, but you never hear the outrage of women
I mean,
having
my
kids
my
without
hot
men, right?
my
There's law
hot take.
proposing we should make it illegal for women to have kids without men, but they have to do it the other way around.
Yeah.
So that's what I'm saying. They're saying that feminine virtues for men are bad because that's the woman doing, that's their privilege, and not men, because women
My
are
kind
the
of
privileged one. That's the reason why.
my hot take, I guess, on the stay-at-home role is I do think it's limiting. I'm not saying it's not important to take care of kids, but I think there is more to life than that, and it doesn't get the most out of, say, a 130 IQ woman's brain. And of course, in the ideal society, there would be way more people of higher intelligence, and it just doesn't seem like the stay-at-home role really is what it used to be, because practically everything's automated now. The sort of mechanical aspect to it, like taking care of the house, is mostly taken care of by automated white goods. Like you're basically just pushing buttons on a few machines. And the actual minding the kids, just keeping an eye on them, making sure they don't shit everywhere and so on. Yes, it's important, but it's also a responsibility that we have no problem putting in the hands of unskilled 13-year-olds. Like we'll get them to be babysitters. So it just doesn't seem, yeah, it doesn't seem that important, to be honest.
Yeah,
It
but if
seems
you
like
can
kind of a
afford
light
it.
duty. Yeah. Yeah.
No, it is a light duty, right? But my point is that if men want to do that, they don't accept that. That's my point.
Oh, yeah,
They
yeah.
think that you need to, they always think like it's so important that you have women around kids and not men. That's my point, right? It's not that
Oh, yeah. I agree that it's a double standard, yeah. Yeah.
I do think though, I
like
think that the point of entry on doing that kind of work, yeah, is a low bar, but like I think this is almost universally true of any kind of a job, is that there's
so important
practically
to mind the kid.
unlimited. There's practically.
If a woman
Have you been
has
talking the whole time? Because you were silent for like
virtues,
10
she's good. If a
seconds.
man has feminine virtues, she's bad.
Yes.
Yeah, no, yeah, the double standard is true, and like the double standard also, it's facilitated by segregating the virtues as well, right? Because if we have like no feminine virtues to work with, then like then we don't
That's
see those virtues in women, right? Could be one
my
argument, but
my
then on the
point
flip
on
side, yeah, we
um
shit on men who have these feminine characteristics when we could have just made it gender neutral from the get-go without really
Yeah,
losing much of anything. But I did want to talk a little about the stay-at-home role though, because like I do think there's something that I think that role essentially has no upper limit in the complexity if you're truly dedicated to like building a
it's
home and
basically like
like
saying
I
that
mean not literally building it but like organizing everything and doing all the upkeep and keeping up with the groceries and everything, but then also when it comes to the parenting, well, part of the reason it's such a hollowed out role is because of school. Like if schools were abolished and it was the natural expectation that you educate your own kids and spend your whole time with them and you take them with you when you go out into the world to get your groceries and do your errands and stuff, like
yeah,
that's such an incredible experience that's so challenging and dynamic. And if you are a creative and intelligent, you find all kinds of different ways to to teach and to open up the world and do everything. And like really the only limit is your imagination. It's just that you could do the bare minimum and the bare minimum's easy. And that's kind of the
yeah.
problem is there's a
And my
discipline factor there.
my hot take, well, first of all, on parenting in general, like I don't think most of the variables that people care about in that regard are actually that important because we have so much evidence on the
I agree.
heritability of every single quantifiable trait under the sun: intelligence, personality, mental illness, predisposition to criminal behavior, like you fucking name it. And the
Sure.
heritabilities are like through the roof. And the shared environment component to heritability studies, which includes any parenting variation in parenting style, is generally pretty minuscule, like pretty close to 0%, which doesn't necessarily mean there's nothing you can do, but it means that nothing that parents do that varies significantly from person to person has makes really a fuck of a difference on how kids turn out. And I also just I'm coming on the second point on education. Um I would agree with you that educating your kid, like in theory, yes, educating your kids is important and it's um worth the time and all the rest of it. I'm actually coming round to just the straight up education is bad view, whether it's at school or anywhere else. Like I'm in favor of radically kind of anarchic unschooling at this point because low IQ kids are going to do what they're going to do. Mid kids are going to do what they're going to do. And if you have a high IQ kid, they'll seek out their own learning. Like you, beyond the basics, like, yes, you need to teach them to read and, some very simple things in like the critical window when they're extremely young. But beyond that, I think they'll find their own fun. Like they'll just start reading and researching and etc. Of their own accord. It doesn't actually require much input, especially not these days when everything's online. So I think you could just let them go at their own pace. And like we're used to this idea that everything has to be very structured these days, but of course it's not how any learning was done in the old days. And I'm not like a traditionalist. I'm just pointing out we're obsessed with this idea, but 300 years ago you would generally just learn whatever your parents did for a living and then that was your profession. Or if not that, then you would kind of just do whatever you want. And I think it would be nice to get back to that. And also, and I know this is getting very far afield, but just a final point. In an ideal world, if you had like a really high trust society, you wouldn't even need parents to be around kids much. Like my mother, for example, she walked to and from school by herself when she was 4, when she had just turned 4. And her parents thought nothing about letting her do that. And my grandparents have stories
Wow.
like this too, of like the free range kids where you would just let them roam wild through the countryside 7-8 hours a day on their own and find their way back. So I think that would be pretty
Back in the
cool.
good old days.
Yeah, I have kind of a laissez-faire approach to parenting in that regard. And that's why I say it's kind of a light duty, or I think ideally it should be. It would be nice if you just sort of let the kids dictate the pace of it, and you had like a super high trust, cool society where you could just have a lot more freedom in that respect.
Yeah, I mean, maybe in the Mushroom Kingdom. To me, I'd just be like too anxious. That's definitely I think where I'd fall, just on like the
Yeah.
emotional side of things.
Well, it's
Just like
not the it's not
I'd be gripping my helicopter.
it's not it's not
Well,
the Mushroom Kingdom though. It's Japan. They do this
Right?
kind of thing in Japan. Yeah.
Oh, but have you seen the Jeppies? They're so cute. It is like Mushroom Kingdom over there.
Yeah.
I'm just
Yeah.
kidding. But
In some ways it is, yeah.
it kind of is.
but they came up with the Mushroom Kingdom.
Exactly. They didn't even have to like be creative. They
Ja-
just like looked
Japanese
around.
people came up with the Mushroom Kingdom storyline though.
Exactly.
Yeah.
They know. Yeah.
I also just
But
it's
the thing I
I'm a
wanted to
big
say
I
about
want to can I
about the
just sorry for interrupting, but I just want to quickly get your guys' take on this.
yeah, sure.
I'm a big
You first.
fan
I
of
want to say
like
afterwards though.
I'm a big fan of like compressed hours in general, like working a standard week but in fewer shifts that are longer. Like I seriously wouldn't mind doing 3 13-hour shifts, depending on what the job was, and then just pissing off for the rest of the week. And I think that would make parenting nicer in some ways as well. Like my brother has a relationship like this sort of with his partner and their daughter, my niece, where basically I think they both work full time, but they do it on compressed hours for 10-hour days, but they have a different day off each. So it's like Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, she's with us. My niece, I mean, she's with her grandparents and me. And then Thursday, she's with mummy. Friday, she's with daddy. And then on the weekend, she's with mummy and daddy. So it's like a mixture of her parents and her grandparents raising her while her parents both work full time. And I think that's pretty cool. Like, I don't see what's damaging to kids about that at all. And I would
That's
like
awesome.
that kind of thing to be, yeah, I'd like that kind of thing to be more common. Compressed hours. I think it's a nice idea. And people say that that's horrible. Like, oh my God, 3 13-hour shifts. Was like, yeah, okay, if you're not planning your meals properly and you're not getting enough sleep because you have to factor in horrendous travel time or something because it's too far away, then
It's a
yes,
loss of
it'll be
human
bad for
history.
you. But if it's not, yeah, I was going to get to that. As long as you're doing it properly and you're getting adequate sleep and good nutrition and all that, I mean, frankly, your ancestors would just fucking laugh in your face at you saying that that's difficult. So, yeah.
Yeah, no, I think that makes perfect sense too. I mean, partly though, I guess you want to caution from that slippery slope,
Yeah.
because it is kind of like we do hope that post-industrial and having capitalism and having more wealth than we've ever had before, that we can afford to kind of move further into luxury rather than back toward the olden times.
Well, no,
But the compressed
it
hours make
is,
sense, and it definitely
yeah.
opens up people's like
It,
possibilities in their schedules and everything.
yeah, I was just gonna say, as far as I'm concerned, it is a luxury to work 3 shifts a week, even if they're really long. Like, I would fucking love that. I'm gonna try to do that in my next job. I think it'll be fucking awesome. Double weekends every week.
There's always like a grass is greener problem though. That's been my experience, right? Like if you're working a 5 day week, you're kind of like, oh, it'd be really cool if like I had only 4 days and they were just an extra hour. And then you're working that and you're like, I don't really like this long weekend because I don't really do much with it. And then like once that Monday comes around and I know all the shifts are long, now I feel bad about it and I don't like that ebb and flow. And then it's like, ooh, now I'm working 6 days a week and they're shorter shifts. But now I'm driving a lot and I kind of don't like that. There's always trade-offs. I guess personally, maybe I just don't have a strong preference one way or another. So that's why, to me, no matter what the situation is, the negatives are always obvious to me.
Yeah.
um,
Well, I think
so yeah, I'm
maybe
gonna
maybe
stick with
the
that
problem
5 day weeks.
maybe the problem there is that you're not structuring your day well enough. Like, I think if I know it sounds really autistic, but like, if I got to do that and I got like a double weekend because I'd done my 3 uber long shifts, I think I would just make a little plan. Like, in the morning, I'm gonna get up bright and early and spend 3 hours reading fine literature, and then another 3 hours learning Japanese, and then I'm gonna cook some new recipes that I've been meaning to try out, and then I'm gonna go to the movies and just like put little things like that in a nice calendar with your household chores and all that as well, and then it'll be great. I think it sounds like the problem there is that you're just not not making optimal use of the time when there's any number of things in the world that you could be doing with those 4 days, 3 days, whatever.
Yeah, no, it's a good point.
Yeah.
I've never been much of like a plan out the itinerary of the day kind of
Yeah.
person.
What's Jay Willie's opinion on this? Do you agree with me? He's gone.
I have.
Oh, hi.
I do agree with you. I just have to add a few things that I want to say, um, and that is that when it comes to the idea that being a stay-at-home parent today isn't really that demanding, and I do kind of like think that's a good thing because a lot of men and women alike are not really that capable of doing a lot of demanding issues with their issues like with their body and also like with certain types of disorders that makes it hard to do a lot of the things that most other people could do, and that means that home parent is like a perfect solution, which means that you can like have your life and have a good life um, within the limitations of that your body allows you to. And I do, and that's the reason why I think that could be quite a good solution for many people, especially myself, that doesn't really that that would find doing like a lot of things that many other people can do quite taxing, way more than other people would find it taxing.
Yeah.
You guys did hear what I said, right?
Yes.
Yeah, there's a little bit of
It's
clips in
time
there,
to
but
shift.
we got it.
I'm also and something else I've been getting
that's
really
cool.
into recently, along with all my other weird ideas, like my radical anti-education stance, is that I'm a big fan of living apart together. I think that's a great idea, which is the idea of people basically maintaining separate residences even when they're married and having children. In other words, it's basically just the living situation of divorce, wherein the children travel between the houses, but you still have that committed partnership. I think it would result in fewer arguments because you both basically just get to have your own space, which is something that I personally really value. And I think it would just mean like less conflict if people were less in each other's hair all the time. And I guess it would oh, what else was I gonna say? Yeah, I think it would be a good de-LARP measure, sort of like the LARP of traditional sex roles, because they're so kind of well, they don't mean the same in modern society that they used to. I think it would make women, it would encourage women to actually be financially independent from men, and it would encourage men to be less I guess less emotionally reliant or psychologically reliant on women, and could move to this situation of just independently cultivating virtue as like an expression of your individual will um, and your identity, as kind of cringe as that sounds. But yeah, I think that would be really cool. And of all people, Sandman actually made a video about it once because the Canadian government were, because you know how you have those like civil marriage laws.
Right, like common
Yeah,
law marriage kind of
right. Yeah,
things.
sorry, common law. The Canadian government was starting to get worried about the trend of LAT living apart together because they wouldn't be able to profit from it, essentially, because it wouldn't be regulated in the same way as cohabiting couples, basically. Um, and that just seems insane. Like the inflation of that, it's going to get to the point where you talk to a woman for 30. He said something like this in the video, where if you talk to a woman once, in the shopping mall or something, the government are going to call that a marriage and start collecting revenues on it. That's obviously an exaggeration, but you understand the point he was making. That was a rare, interesting Sandman video.
Yeah, well, and the crazy thing about those kinds of situations is like you will see ones where
But it's also
literally
one
the
thing I noticed.
changes in residency that the woman does are like exactly what the law requires. So that it's like you're sitting there in court and it's like, oh, you were there like exactly the 18 days you needed, and then you left for a week and then came back for exactly the number of days to make sure it was right. It's like so flamboyant, but like since that's technically the law, I don't know if you could make that like the argument where it's like, okay, you have to like this is clearly bad faith, you know? But yeah, it's yeah.
Yeah. But yeah, I don't know why people have this obsession with living together. It's like,
I think part of it they're afraid of infidelity.
yeah, that's part of it. Yeah. Like I remember.
Well, the other thing too, like in theory, having a family together in one residence is more efficient for a lot of reasons, right? And then part of the issue with divorce is that then you'd have people needing totally separate residences and all this moving around in the kerfuffle. So it's kind of like on one hand, you
But it
lose out
also
on the
means-
efficiency, but then also it
Yeah.
means that everybody's already set up for their divorce in case they need
Yeah,
one.
exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's what I was gonna say. That's, I mean, it's
Yeah.
kind of, it sounds tongue in cheek when you say it, but it actually is significant in my opinion. It means there's no disputing what belongs to whom, if you get what I'm saying, when it
Yeah.
comes to divorce, because you have separate residences, and the man's place, everything's paid for by him. The woman's place, everything's paid for by her. So there's no argument. And I guess the only thing you'd be arguing over at that point would be the kids, custody of the kids, which should be equal as the default, of course.
Well, and of course that wouldn't even be unique to that situation anyway, but yeah.
Yeah. And it would also be,
That is the law in
Yeah.
Sweden, by the way.
Yeah. It's just occurred to me though that it would be completely
Well,
kind
I
of
have-
meaningless. Yeah, go on. Sorry, go on. Jay Willie.
No, you go on. I say later.
Yeah, it's
Okay, yeah. It's basically like I don't. Okay, who should talk?
okay, yeah, sorry.
I think I gave me.
Yeah, all I was going to say was if you allocated equal custody in a situation like that in an LAT marriage living apart together, that would be meaningless because that would be the situation they were already in. Separate residences with the kids traveling between them. Like it's literally just the same. So yeah. But yeah, go on, that was it, Jay Willie.
Oh yeah, basically what I'm trying to say is that to me personally, I don't really. I think that might be because I have too much autism, honestly. But so there, and to me, I don't really find to live independence to be something that I want for a long time. The most close to that I've gotten was when I lived at a college dormitory. And I think that's like I like to live with other people. I don't like to live alone. Like the only time I want to be alone is when people are like out working or some 2 days in a row. I don't like to live like permanently alone. I think there's like it's too much to do, and I can't keep up with that. But I think independence is good for a lot of people, but not for all people. And if that makes sense, some people really likes to have the partners.
Yeah, but like you can live close to each other and just, visit each other the way that you would a friend, I guess. But yeah, I know what you're saying though. Yeah, it does make sense. I was expecting you to say, because I'm autistic, I
Around,
do
or the
want
families
independence.
around
Yeah,
to be independent, if that makes sense.
yeah.
I don't know if we mentioned this too, but obviously it would really, really complicate domestic violence. I mean, in a good way, right? Because it'd be like, how? Like, you know what I mean?
Yeah,
Like,
exactly. Like
yeah.
the benefits are just endless. There's not going to be much domestic violence because you're going to be around each other less. So, yeah. I mean, I guess it sounds quacky to some people, but I don't know. I think it's a great idea.
I think the other funny idea is people like living together as roommates, but they each have separate spouses, and the spouses are in similar situations. Like to me, that's kind of amusing, right?
I'm not sure what you mean. Like,
like you have your wife and she doesn't live with you, but you do live like in an apartment with a couple of roommates.
oh, so like you live in an apartment building with roommates and she lives in a different building also with roommates.
Yeah, and like your roommates are also married with people who don't live with you.
It's pointless to me.
That's amazing.
If you're gonna have roommate, why can't it just be your partner? That's what I would want, honestly. Like,
Yeah. I mean, at that point, it's like, I've never liked the idea of having
to be
roommates.
my partner, I'd want it to be someone else.
I also don't understand why.
Well, I love having roommates, but if I have a relationship, I want to be with my partner, not my roommate.
Yeah. Oh, so you're saying
But
you
if I
wouldn't?
don't have a relationship, then I would want to live with a roommate.
Would you?
Not
So
forever, you know.
would you date a roommate? Interesting question.
Of course, I actually kind of would, but I would do it with like kind of like having an escape patch in mind, because what if it didn't work out? And so that's what I probably would want to do if that didn't work out, but I would still do it. I would just make sure that I had an ability to, get out if it didn't work out. So yeah, I would date a roommate. And if I
Yeah.
dated someone, when I was gonna live with someone, I would like to live with the person I'm dating and not someone else. I guess it depends on how long we have been dating, though. Like if we've just been dating for 2 months, then I guess you need to be in a proper relationship before you can live together. But then when you are, you prefer to live with each other and not with someone else.
Yeah.
But that's only when it gets serious, you know.
It's just I've just had another thought. It's I don't know. I mean, I think I can guess what your take will be. What's your opinion on the polarizing polyamory thing? I think it's a bad idea, personally.
Yeah, I think it's a bad idea too. It's not my cup of tea. But if people wanna have their thing, then just let them do whatever they want. But if things go sour, then that's their problem, not mine.
Yeah.
And I hate being
I'm back, by the way. I was gone for just a second there.
because that's not what I want. Like, it's nothing. It's a good idea.
Oh yeah, it's just
What you say?
I brought up polyamory, and Jay was telling me that he doesn't like it. I don't either. But yeah.
It just seems like way too many steps. It's kind of like just be open.
Something I have an idea is that you
have
can take
a relationship.
Yeah.
Like, polyamory is not my cup of tea. If I'm gonna date someone, I'm also gonna date that one and no one else, right? But there's one thing I'm also think it's an option for a lot of people, is that a man and a woman could technically have kids together, but they don't have to be romantically involved just because they have kids together. You know what I'm saying?
I mean, run that one by me again. Can you explain that again?
Like, if a man and a woman just work together very well, but they're not interested in each other sexually, like, you can have kids with somebody in that circumstance, but you're not raising the kids as you are married. You are like a romantic partner.
Oh yeah, I mean, I guess you could raise a kid with somebody who was just your friend.
Do it because you work together well, and that makes sense to you.
Yeah, I mean, I guess the worry that people would have with that is if you're just friends, the word "just" is in scare quotes. I don't want to beg the question there, but they would say that that's not the same as a committed marriage, where you're in it for the long haul and all that, where you have that contractual agreement sort of a thing.
Yeah, well, the other thing too is anything that's
you can still be
non-traditional
married.
is by definition experimental, and then when you apply that to something like a family structure, there is some cause for concern there that I think often doesn't get taken seriously enough. I mean, when people talk about gay marriage, then it becomes super serious, but then somehow this polyamory shit, I don't know, is it more stigmatized? I guess it's hard to say. But
to be honest,
with a polyamory relationship, now there's so many more links in the chain for it to all shut
Depending on who you're
down.
talking
Whereas
to,
if it's two people, it's just one relationship.
I mean, my take on gay marriage is that I wouldn't say I'm I'm not morally opposed to it in the way that Christians are morally opposed to it. I personally just don't see the point, because I view it as like a reproductive contract, full stop. Like sometimes when people raise this argument, one of the counter objections you'll hear is, okay, but what about infertile people getting married? You would say that that's okay, wouldn't you? And like
And
I'm
it's like, no, that
personally,
sounds pointless too. Like,
yeah,
yeah,
I'm quite happy to just bite the bullet on that. It's like, yeah, if you're not planning on having kids, which most gay people aren't, and can't anyway, or if you're not capable of having
I
kids,
think
then I don't really see the point in marriage. Like, yeah, it's great that you love each other and all that, but
Can't have. That's what I'm gonna try to do.
do you need the state to codify that? Is the thing?
see, that's the problem though, because the state did,
But
and then they linked marriage up to like a bunch of other like
I,
arbitrary shit, you know. So that was what opened the door for gay marriage. And then the annoying thing was after it became a thing, everyone was like, "Oh, well, why can't we just have the government not be involved in marriage?" And it's like, yeah, that's what libertarians have been saying since forever, and now that they couldn't have their cake and eat it too, now that's their position. It's just stupid.
Yeah,
I think it matters very little though, like one way or another.
but we need to yeah, on the libertarianism thing. I'm not like a principled libertarian in like the capital L sense, even though I do agree with many of their policy recommendations. I do think that the state is bloated, and the tax system is really bad for different reasons though. Like, the problem with it as I see it is that it punishes you for doing good stuff, and I would kind of like to see a tax system that punishes you for doing bad stuff as opposed to good stuff. Like, the income tax punishes you for working, the sales tax punishes you for exchanging goods and services, the VAT, the value added tax, punishes you for adding value. That's probably the most insane one. The inheritance tax punishes you for being good to your children, for providing for your children in death. Um, so yeah, it's really bad. It would be good to sort of phase out the various Gibbs dispensation processes and start using the tax system to punish bad stuff like, I don't know, eating shitty food or overconsumption of scarce resources, that kind of thing. I heard that Nevada, the US state of Nevada, they have an interesting like gambling tax. They have a tax on, well, no, it's called a gaming tax. I think it refers to the same thing though. Like, I presume it's not video games or something. And
No,
that,
yeah, it's for gambling games, yeah.
yeah, and that replaced their income tax. They were able to get rid of the income tax because of that. Yeah. And I mean, I think if you made that trade off with people, if you said, okay, on the one hand, you can have the income tax, which punishes you for working, takes your hard earned money away. Or on the other hand, you can have a tax levied against you that's supposed to disincentivize something that you really probably shouldn't be doing, like eating shitty food or gambling all your money away or so on. Then which would you choose? Kind of thing.
It's
It's
an
interesting.
interesting idea, right? Because, like, for example, if I think about like fast food, and then it's like, well, a lot of the times, a lot of the reason you go get some fast food is because it's fast and it's really cheap, and you know, you get a pretty good amount of nutrition for the amount of money, right? Like your dollar to calories trade off at like a McDonald's is practically unrivaled, right? So that's
Yeah.
great. So
Also,
then what happens is so if we have a tax to make it, you know, as expensive as a pack of cigarettes, right? It basically is the same idea. It's the tobacco tax, right? Well, now then what in theory could happen is you disincentivize that behavior, but then you lose all your tax revenue. And I thought, oh no, that's a problem for the system. But then I realized, oh wait, this sounds perfect because then the government will collapse and everyone will be like morally virtuous.
yeah, it is a dilemma there. It's interesting because, like, on the one hand, if your goal is to stop people from smoking, like if that's actually what you want, then it would make more sense to just ban it or make it so ridiculously expensive that nobody will buy it. But if that's not the goal, and the goal is actually to make money from it, then maybe you just want to put a little tax on it, and then people will still buy it, and you can make revenues from it. It just depends, like, what your goals are.
Well, because my understanding is right now they're like, because the argument is they say, well, you smokers are more expensive to the system, and that's why we're going to gank you. But
Right.
it's like they definitely they get more money out of the smokers than the smokers cost the system at this point. And it is
Also, I
literally
know
just like a cash grab, but also it appears to have not really disincentivized it because they did it like a boiling frogs thing where they add a little bit each time, and then you blink and cigarettes are 20 bucks a pack, you know?
I know it's really like it's a weird autistic thing where you just like the sound of a certain phrase, but I love this term I've coined: Gibbs dispensation processes. Like it
Gibbs
sounds like,
dispensation processes.
yeah, it's like a from 1984.
That's
It could have
amazing.
come out of a dystopian novel or something.
I like
Yeah, we need
Gibbs
to.
dispensation.
Yeah, yeah, we
I
need
want to
to.
write a dystopian novel.
Yeah. What would the premise be of the novel?
Uh, well, actually, it's kind of weird. I was like thinking about the certain like genetic conditions that are quite debilitating that are sex based, right? And most of them are male, affecting males more than only and not females, right?
Yeah. Something else that's really amazing, is like if you had good public services, which they allegedly
Sorry,
have in
evil
Scandinavia.
actions become like dominating humanity, right?
Yeah.
Um,
Oh my god.
This is how you get people invested in the idea, though. Because now I've already got questions.
to and that would like includes like because it would literally
We're getting the spoiler-free synopsis. The synopsis-free
mean
synopsis.
that women would be the sex are the physical. Well, it's still,
It should be written in this style too, where it's just like words broken out in space here and there, and then slowly it comes together at the end.
Yeah. Like a James Joyce novel.
what do you think?
You know what movie
So
I
that's
want?
basically good, though.
Did either of you guys ever see the movie Cuck?
No.
Okay, so
No,
I will say
I didn't see
Was
that
it
one.
any
it's a
good?
good movie. I mean, it's not a great movie, but it actually is surprisingly good. Like I mean, what they're trying to, the message they're trying to say in the movie is obviously fucking stupid, but they don't really successfully do that. You just come away being quite sympathetic towards this Cuck character and feeling bad about all the stuff that happens to him. But like, I'd love it if there was a movie like that where instead of him like being influenced by the quote unquote red pill in the movie or whatever, instead he does all of the good feminist blue pilled things, and he gets a chubby girlfriend who's kind of nerdy with bangs, but roughly the looks match, and things are finally looking good, and he's gonna do this big thing to help all the women, right? Because he was disgusted by some of his red pilled friends, and it motivated him to do this. So he's hashtag doing the right thing, and the whole gist of it is it all comes together, and then like the feminists all mock him, right? And then his girlfriend falsely accuses him of rape, and then everyone betrays him, and then he kills himself. And then it ends with men's rights activists like pointing to his case and being like, "See, this is what you get for being blue pill." And they're a little bit callous, right? So because I don't want them to come off as like the quote unquote good guys. They're just kind of like in the background,
Yeah.
Yeah, and it's called Blue.
I mean, that kind of sounds interesting.
I think that would be a movie that would win all the awards. It would make everyone cry.
Speaking of, I don't really go to see big budget movies often, big budget movies, but I'm thinking I might go to see the new Mission Impossible this Saturday, and then the following week I might go and see Chris Nolan's new film. I don't know if either of you has heard much of the publicity around either of those. Like Nolan's thing is supposed to be quite interesting, and Tom Cruise's new thing, the new Mission Impossible, is supposed to be quite fun. Doing cliff jumps 6 times in a row and the stuff that Tom Cruise does. He does seem to love doing that.
See, my thing is I just don't like action movies. Right? So then to me,
I
like
I
the Mission
usually don't
Impossible
either.
as a franchise is just like out.
Yeah.
I thought about though because it's been popping up everywhere, and I was like, oh, I can like watch a bunch of the older ones on these free services and stuff and see if I get hyped or whatever. But like I like my movie to be like kind of in the background, right? So lately it's been anything that has subtitles and anything that's like really actiony is just like out.
Yeah.
I like moody things that take place mostly in a single room. That really
Yeah.
works for me. That's about my pace. But but the Nolan one, that's the Oppenheimer one. That one
Yeah.
I might see just because I don't really know much about the history behind that in depth, so it might be kind of interesting. But
Yeah.
I always wait though for I don't ever like watch anything that's like new as it's happening. I just like wait and let the entire world curate it for me before
One
I
one
decide.
interesting thing I know about him, which I doubt will be covered in the film. I have a sneaking suspicion. It'd be amazing if it is, though. Is that um, he attempted to kill or was planning to kill one of his professors in school, but his parents were able to kind of get him out of any kind of charge. And I know there are some people on the far right who, they see this as kind of like an exemplar case of the JQ thing because his family had those kinds of connections. So they were able to just work the magic and get him out of being charged. If it's true, and I don't know if it's true, I have a sneaking suspicion it won't be mentioned. Yeah.
No, I'm sure they'll cover it. That's funny though. Yeah, that's
But
the origin of the ADL too.
yeah.
It's like wild that no one knows that.
But yeah, Jay Willie, thoughts on either of those films? It's hard to believe that Tom Cruise is 61. Like he really doesn't act it.
Well, he's got that fucking adrenochrome.
Yeah, drinking the blood of children to become an immortal vampire.
We know they fucking fly out to Saturn every couple of years.
When Jay Willie eventually comes back. If he does.
Another thing I think should exist is an anti-feminist horror anthology series. Because feminist horror is a thing. I am an expert in feminist horror. I have seen every feminist horror.
I'll never get over the way Americans pronounce that word. Like, to me, it really sounds like you're saying W-H-O-R-E.
W-U?
W-H-O-R-E.
Oh, horror.
Yeah.
Yeah, because what we do is just kind of say horror and then kind of like roll
Horror.
around on the R a little bit. Horror. Horror.
Unless you're from the East Coast, like I guess some of them would say something like horror.
Hara. There we go. Hara.
Yeah. That's a thing in American, like, I know this is really autistic, but I'm kind of a phonetics nerd, so I'm interested in this. There's like a thing, an east-west cline in American dialects where if you're on the East Coast, like New York, Rhode Island, Massachusetts, those places, they'll say things like orange and Florida, whereas the rest of Americans will say orange and Florida.
Yeah, I don't even know where that would come from. Although what you described to me, that would sound like more southernish to me. But I haven't really
Oh,
been
really?
to the coast very much, so I don't really know.
Yeah. And there's something else that happens as you go further west, which is that the sounds in cot and court merge. Like, I'll have to spell them out. Like, these two words, I'll write them in the chat.
You mean cot, as in like a cot that you sleep in?
Those two words. As you go further west in America, they sound the same. Like in California, for instance, those two words sound the same. But in the east of America and the south, like southeast, there's usually a distinction preserved in the vowels of those two words.
Oh,
Yeah.
I'm trying to think.
I mean, they're definitely distinct in my accent, but not for all Americans, for some of them.
No, because honestly, like when I was teaching phonics, I do not believe that we would really honor a distinction between these two ones. Like the O and cot, the right? That's like your standard short O vowel. A
Yes.
U G H, that aw. Yeah, that's the
Yeah.
same.
Interesting.
It's aw and aw. It's just aw.
Yeah.
Hot. Yeah, it's the same.
Yeah.
I had to do the little like clapping with the saying the words. Like how do we put the sounds together again?
Yeah.
It's really funny because since I didn't learn English through phonics, when I was teaching it, I had to like learn it like I was a baby because I had no idea what the fuck it was. And they're like, "You're supposed to teach this." And I was like, "Okay, like let's go."
Yeah. Yeah. Well, it's interesting because the standard of American television and radio is this thing that's like casually agreed to. Everybody casually agrees to refer to it as General American, which is just like a generic American accent that doesn't have many regionally distinctive features, and you'll find it all over the class spectrum and so on. But like in Britain, it was a completely different situation because there was no majority accent. There's like a million different accents. So they went with the speech of the upper class in the southeast. There's a particular continuum of dialects in the southeast, kind of stretching out in a big circle around London in the big ball sack in the southeastern region where most of the people live. And the upper class accent, which sort of evolved in the 19th century because the upper class were completely sequestered from the rest of society and just went to their own boarding schools, like the tradition of the English boarding school and all that. Like that kind of, I mean, they existed for way longer, but it really came to the fore in the 19th century towards like the what's sometimes referred to as the Second British Empire, when it was really getting into its heyday. And they developed this unique way of speaking, which has now evolved. Like that really old traditional accent that you hear in old, like British Pathé newsreels and stuff from the 40s. That doesn't really exist anymore. And it's been replaced with this thing that I'm speaking now that people just call like SSB, Standard Southern British, like the generic British accent that you hear in films and such. Yeah. But like the interesting thing about the older accent, like the kind of really posh accent that people associate with Britain, is it evolved within a certain social class, and Americans don't really have that. Like that, there is no concept in America of a distinctively upper class way of talking.
Yeah, no,
But
we
in
kind of have like a pervasive anti-elitism,
yeah,
I'd say, right across the board. So then I think the idea that you focus on pronunciation always seemed very like just like pedantic and stuff like that.
yeah, yeah, it is hilarious though. Like when you listen to advertisements on TV from Britain as recently as the 70s, and they all have these like ri ridiculously posh upper crust accents, which sounds so old fashioned now. But yeah, uh, it's yeah, I mean it's one of my favorite subjects, linguistics, especially phonetics.
Yeah, I wish I had kept my linguistics book from college, but whatever.
Yeah.
That was such bullshit that my college only had like basically the one course in anything related to linguistics. Like, uh,
Yeah. Oh, speaking of like the late 19th
I'm gonna
century,
take linguistic again, I think.
yeah, the upper class of that period in Britain developed a variety of like weird parenting habits that they're kind of famous for. Like the oh god, hang on, I'm just gonna find this quote. I don't know if I already no, I didn't. Um, this quote from a British guy like of that class who was forced to go to preparatory schools throughout his life. Yeah. This is from the British poet Robert Graves. Yeah, he says, and he attended 6 different preparatory schools in Britain in the 20th century. He said, preparatory school boys live in a world completely dissociated from from home life. They have a different vocabulary, a different moral system, even different voices. On their return to school from the holidays, the changeover from home self to school self is almost instantaneous, whereas the reverse process takes at least 2 weeks. A preparatory schoolboy, when caught off his guard, will call his mother please matron, and always addresses any male relative or friend of the family as sir, like a schoolmaster. I used to do it myself. School life becomes the reality and home life the illusion. In England, the parents of the governing classes virtually lose any intimate touch with their children from about the age of 8, and any attempts on their part to insinuate home feeling into school life are resented. So that just kind of like paints a picture. And that was normal. Like they had that they always had like a weird attitude to their kids, never really cared much about them. Like there was a satirical writer from Britain of that class, P.G. Wodehouse, is quite famous, who was famous for writing satirical stories about people from that kind of background. His parents had him until he was 2 years old, and they then, pissed off, left for Hong Kong at the time when Hong Kong was a British colony, obviously. And then he just became a virtual stranger to his parents, and he was raised by nannies and by his aunts and uncles, and got shuffled around from pillar to post between various prep schools, like private schools, boarding schools. Sorry, yeah. It's just so weird. This like cynical, detached attitude that they had. I don't understand it. Yeah.
That is really weird. I wonder how many other places have something even that like remotely comparable. And then when
Yeah.
you were saying that it takes them like the weeks to like act normal when they're at home,
Yeah.
and then when they go back, then it okay. Because I thought you were saying the reverse, and I was like, wait, I think it means yeah the other way. So that. Mhm.
Yeah. Um.
Oh, and Jay Willie, we can have you explain your idea for the dystopian writing, but I mean, it literally is like often it's a crapshoot.
Oh, I
It's like
just
we lose 90% of what you say when you try to talk. So
before we
we'll have to
move on,
figure something out.
I'm just curious. Has boarding school ever been a big thing in the States? It's like a big traditional thing among rich people here. But
Most people only bring it up when they talk about like natives being forced into boarding schools and stuff like that.
all right, so it's like talked about as an abuse. That's
Yeah.
yeah. That kind of says it all. Yeah.
Yeah, well, and that's
Yeah.
the thing too, is like anything like Harry Potter, right? That entire genre is essentially, the boarding school drama.
Yeah.
And yeah, I don't think it ever really has a very
Well, yeah,
positive. But
that's
I
I
guess
just
Harry Potter might be the only exception where it's kind of like, wow, this is a boarding school that'd be really cool to go to because it's so magical.
yeah. I mean, I think that's hilarious as well. Like the fact that she's an insufferable leftist, but like she clearly fetishizes the English public school system with all its stuffy connotations of like wealth and privilege and all that. It's just there's something funny about it.
Well, and just like being like a diehard turf that way is really cringe.
Oh, is
Like the
she?
fact that, oh, are you kidding me? Yeah, that's her whole thing now is on Twitter. She's always bitching about like, how the trans menace and how it's threatening what it is a woman is. And that's why all of her fans are pissed at her. And that's why everyone is pissed off about Hogwarts Legacy.
All right. Well, it's just
It's just
yeah
funny.
that trans exclusionally radical feminist. Like I guess that's natural, yeah, to interpret it that way. It's just when I heard the word turf, I imagined like a certain type of person who wants to,
Oh
I don't
yeah,
know,
and like I don't
reduce.
like using the term just because it gets thrown around as like an insult. And when I say it, I don't even really mean it as an insult. Like the feminist end of it, I mean as an insult. But mostly it's just, well, obviously, it's pathetic
Robert,
that
what
they
would you
care
say
about
if
it.
somebody is acting like the things that people don't like about so-called turfs, then why we don't use some radical feminists if that's what they are? Because turf is just mainly used as a slur, because there's no actual difference between a radical because it kind of like used to come with the whole idea of being a radical feminist that you kind of have to be trans exclusionary because you can't really be a radical feminist if you can't really if if you don't have a strict definition of the term women, like it's kind of like don't go to the terms exclusionary, because it's kind of like, because it doesn't really make a difference, and also TERF is being used as a slur. For if any woman basically disagree with time is not like they can't just own a TERF for fuck's sake, which is kind of funny. But you know, like every time any woman basically said that, well, you can't really have your period if you're not female, then say, or if you're not, if you say like, oh, men can never have periods, right? Then you get called a TERF for saying that. Like it's basically just like, it's mainly just an insult. Like it's not, doesn't really convey any like additional meaning to the term radical feminist. So it's kind of like not useful. If I'm gonna call someone who's a radical feminist a TERF, I'm doing it because it's an insult and not because.
Right, like because it's like to make it a definition is not very useful. I mean, because they're essentially the same. The
It's a
difference is
descriptor
that the
because-
TERFs see trans men as or trans women as men, and they're misandrists. So that just lines up. And then the only difference between their the trans inclusive, I guess we call them TERFs, would just be that they drank the whole Kool-Aid, and then therefore I don't know, like they're pro tranny. But it's also funny because it's like they clearly don't view trans women as women and treat them that way, because they still do see them as men, I think, like deep down, they just put like an ideological veneer over it.
This is really an autistic question, since I've never done this
Right,
before.
but that's why I said
like,
it's no point of calling.
Can you guys maybe tell me, when you book tickets to see a movie online, like obviously it doesn't actually print out a ticket for you in your house. So what does that mean? Does that mean you go in to the cinema like with your debit card or something, and you, I don't know, just, well, do you have to wave around something and then someone gives you your ticket once you've paid for it online, or like how does it work?
They'll probably send you an email confirmation,
Right,
and
and then you
often
show
there's
them that.
something they can scan off of your phone that way.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Shows you how uncultured I am.
Sometimes you refuse to cut anything other than a printed ticket. Like what they happened actually this year, I couldn't find a printer and they required a ticket, and I was like, what the fuck am I doing? Then I did find a printer the next day anyway. It was like the only way they can accept it was a printed ticket and nothing on the phone, which was super annoying.
Yeah, that sounds very archaic to me. I mean, I can imagine that being the case back in the days of like
But
the earliest days of Fandango and stuff, but I do believe now they'll just send you an email.
Nice. Yeah,
and usually they'll probably just let you flash your phone at them and not even need to scan anything. Movie theaters are pretty relaxed, at least in my experience.
You know what's great as well? The glorious British weather. Because right now it is 57 degrees Fahrenheit in July, the warmest month of the year, and I just love it. I think it's great.
That does sound nice.
Yeah,
we got a slightly chilly day today.
What was it like? So like 80?
I don't think it's quite that hot today. I used to use the fucking weather to find the weather, but the fucking weather is down.
Yeah. See, the nice thing about British weather, because it's so tepid because of the ocean, is that literally any time of year you can comfortably or pretty comfortably just go for a walk, and it's nice, or a run or whatever, and it's just nice and comfortable. You can go out in a t-shirt, or if it's not that warm, you can just put some light layers on, because it's never boiling hot and it's never freezing cold, really. Some people don't like that, but like when people say that they enjoy living in places like Florida, where it's eternally incredibly hot and incredibly humid, so it's not like a dry heat where perspiration's way more efficient and therefore way more bearable. It's a horrible humid heat that makes it feel way worse. I mean, it's just a bit beyond me how people actually like that.
No, because the humidity is what makes it so much fucking worse when it's hot. And if it is dry, it's actually not bad at all. So yeah, that's. But I checked it. Yeah, we're at 78.8 degrees. So yeah, not 80. Fuck you.
Sorry, what was that? Oh yeah.
So
Yeah. But yeah, personally, I like between 50 and 60 degrees Fahrenheit. Like that's my favorite temperature range, probably. It's just
I never really
nice.
became interested in temperatures until I was in Hong Kong and had like the AC where I'd set the degrees on it. And then it was interesting because it was in Fahrenheit. But I would always be really minimal with that stuff as much as possible.
Minimal.
Yeah, I would just kind of try to cope with however the weather is, and if it's really, really hot, just wear less and move less,
I mean, there's a woman from Hong Kong who works at my workplace who always puts a jacket on, like a sweatshirt, when she goes outside, even at this time of year when it's like well, sometimes in the high 60s during the daytime, and that's about as hot as it gets. And
That makes perfect sense.
she says that that's like cold.
No, it's no, because in Hong Kong, you have to dress for every kind of temperature because you're going in and outdoors so frequently to get anywhere,
Yeah.
and they always have really, really aggressive air conditioning. So like you can't just trust the hot weather to work. And yeah, and then
This
and
is
then
something.
they
This is
also
something
they
I've
walk
heard.
slowly. They walk more slowly, and therefore they sweat less because they plan ahead.
This is something I've heard about hot countries, especially in Asia, where like Singapore and Kuala Lumpur and places like that in Malaysia, where you're outside, it's impossibly hot and humid, so you're in a t-shirt and shorts, as would make sense. And then as soon as you go into a building, it's like you're freezing cold and you have to
Hmm.
put on layers. Yeah,
No, exactly. You can't win.
yeah.
You're just always a mess.
Yeah.
It sounds kind of stupid. Like, why do they have to make it so goddamn cold inside? Why can't they just make it cold? Like, why can't they just make it like comfortable? You know, like what the fuck?
Because they're low IQ.
No,
Is it
it'll
because they
get
have too
because
many
then it'll get
fatties?
too hot later, and those are the
Yes, they
first two
are.
complaints.
it.
Those are the number two
Asian
complaint. Number one and number two is too hot, too cold.
and that's fuck up.
You know.
Yeah.
That's so fucking dumb. It's like the worst of all worlds.
Yeah.
You have like a seasonal rainfall pattern where you live, Spacepan? Like is the summer wetter than the winter or vice versa?
I don't know if it's that strong because I feel like it's barely like we expect rain, periodically. The whole April showers thing kind of checks out. Like during the spring, there's definitely more rain. And then of course once it gets to the winter, we get like a shitload of snow.
Oh right. Yeah.
But we
Yeah.
have very like dynamic seasons, which is one thing that people like about Minnesota.
When you say dynamic, do you mean like extreme? Like just big temperature swings?
Basically, yeah.
Yeah. Well, that's fairly normal for way inland on a continent. But yeah. Yeah. I guess the only place in America that has a climate similar to Britain would be the West Coast, the Northwest Coast, like Oregon and such. And coastal Northern California is supposed to be pretty nice too, like very mild Crescent City and Eureka and places like that. I know this is like a really stupid question because America is a much bigger place than Britain, but you ever been to California?
Yeah, I have. But I've never really been there for an extended period of time. We would go there for like a mock trial tournament. So then I'd be there for
Horrible.
like a weekend, and I'd be like just like hanging out at UCLA the whole time in
Ah,
classrooms, doing fake court. So I didn't really get to see much of California. Like
ah,
on one of those visits, our coach, like she promised she'd take us to the beach, and we had like no time, and then there was a bunch of traffic, and like we ended up spending like literally 10 minutes at the beach before getting on the plane and leaving.
yeah.
She tried. She tried to do right by us. She was a good coach. She was a good lady. But that was funny. It's like, oh, we finally figured out how to get to the beach. We finally found a parking spot. Well, let's kick some sand around for a little bit and then fuck off.
Yeah.
Oh, and then we visited one time for a tournament in January, and we all went in the ocean and swam for a little bit.
Was it cold?
There, oh, it was so cold that actually that you don't feel cold when you're going in the water. Because this was
Right,
like during,
because
this was like winter. Yeah.
like it numbs you, kind of thing.
Yeah, completely. Yeah. Which in
That's
hindsight is maybe a little bit dangerous, but
very. Yeah. Like Joe Rogan constantly. I've had this joke with my brother about like when Joe Rogan tells people to jump into ice baths. It is just kind of sickly funny or like weird when you consider the number of people he's probably killed by encouraging them to do that, because you can literally have a heart attack and die because of the shock.
you know what though? If they did die that way, at least they got that DMT
Yeah. Oh yeah, of course, because he's
because they
obsessed with
died.
that. Right. Yeah.
Yeah, that is dark. That is funny actually.
Do
Well, okay,
you?
but jumping into an ice bath water, I don't think that's a real danger. It's more of like if you're in like real natural water where there's like waves and shit, and then you could like lose your track or whatever. And I don't know.
Well, no, it's more like because the water in an ice bath would actually be colder in all likelihood. But yeah, I know what
Oh,
you
yeah, I suppose, yeah.
mean. Yeah. Yeah, I feel like Jay Willie has probably been wanting to say something for a bit. Do you want to say anything? Assuming your connection doesn't cut out, which is unlikely.
Yeah, right, like he's built up all the connection karma. I wonder if it's a time of day thing. I don't know.
Possibly. Which
But yeah,
South
Jay
Africa?
Willie, your internet didn't used to be that. Maybe if he streams it through his, I wonder if that. Oh, I guess that would definitely be worse. I don't know.
Yeah. Which South African city is he in?
I'm not. Is he in South Africa right now? I
We
think I
have
tried
a.
to ask.
Oh,
Oh,
I
hello.
used to be in Johannesburg last time. I'm actually
Yeah.
not in South Africa right now. I was, but I was, but I was in Johannesburg. That's where I lived last. But when I move back, I'm not gonna move to Johannesburg. I'm gonna move to Potchefstroom and not Johannesburg. And Potchefstroom is a lot nicer than Johannesburg, actually. Even though the Johannesburg were kind of okay.
So which country
And
are you
before
in
I lived
now?
in Johannesburg, I lived in Cape Town, which was much nicer than Johannesburg.
Yeah.
I don't want to say when we are live.
Okay.
But it's in Europe. It's in Europe.
Yeah.
But I have worse connections here than I used to have in South Africa, which is annoying.
I mean, like when you say you don't want to say, it's not plausible that you could be doxxed, is it? If you just said the name of the country, like that doesn't really narrow it down. But okay, yeah.
Well, but it's mainly just because we are live on stream. That's
Right.
that's mainly why I don't want to say. It would be easy if we were like in just like in a live call, you know.
Yeah.
15 deaths. This is for what's it called? Oh, I was trying to copy this name, Wim Hof. Is that where
Wim
Joe
Hof.
Rogan's getting it? I don't know. Yeah. Yep.
Dutch extreme athlete, yeah, and he looks exactly like you would expect that kind of person to look.
Right.
The There's something about those headband things, like they all wear those for some reason. Yeah.
It's funny. Man, that is crazy. He has the worst records ever. I hate this. Record
what
for swimming under ice. Record for like prolonged contact with ice directly. It's like stop, no. Like
holds a record for a barefoot half marathon on ice and snow.
stop, no. I don't like this.
Yeah.
Wait, it says the genre is rock. Does he also do music?
Where does it say that?
Oh, I think my Google just pulled information randomly. I could like screenshot what it pulled up on Google, but I don't think it matters that much.
Oh, he's Dutch. A Dutch motivational speaker. That must be an interesting thing to do for a living.
I mean, I guess once you've like done the ice stunts, you could just not do it anymore and then just grift off of doing speeches. That's what I would do. I wouldn't want to fucking fuck around with ice ice anymore. I'd be like, I'm so done.
Yeah. Yeah.
Looks
Does
like his
your
record did get broken.
does your workplace have a paid lunch break? Or is it unpaid?
Unpaid.
Oh, so is mine. And it's an hour. An unpaid hour. Just seems completely degenerate, but yeah. They should give me as much Gibbs as possible.
Yeah, I don't. Yeah. No, the new job I'm starting is gonna be like a phone one, which means that the breaks will be strict.
Look what Jay Willie said in the chat.
Too autistic to be motivated by a speaker.
Yeah. You'll never guess what happened to me this morning. My boss told me that the time I was going for coffee breaks in the morning, but when I say coffee break, I was literally just going to the coffee machine, getting a drink, coming back. She said I needed to subtract that time from my lunch hour because it was taking too long. Allegedly, it was taking about 6 minutes, which is probably because I usually go to the toilet first because I go back and forth to the toilet a lot in the morning. And that was yesterday. Yesterday she told me that. And today my suspicion was confirmed because I left the mailroom in the morning, went to the toilet to take a shit, then went and got my coffee. And when I was on my way back into the room, she was there and she said, don't forget to keep an eye on those break times. So now she expects me to factor in my shit taking and like subtract that time from my lunch hour, which just seems completely insane.
Yeah, no, I can see how that's kind of like bullshit. It kind of depends on the sort of job it is. But yeah, for anything that's like time sensitive, like
Yeah.
like for example, like anything for like if someone's like working like at a restaurant, right? Or if your job is like it has to do with inbound phone calls or any number of things, right? That could just come in and then need to be done in a time sensitive way. Versus like if it's an office and you have some big project and like you just gotta finish it before the end of the day, you know, you kind of have an ebb and flow there.
Yeah.
And there's a sense too of like if you're an office
Being a
manager
me,
of
I
like
have to deal
picking
with
your
this.
battles, like camping out at someone's cubicle because they were pooping for 5 minutes is a little bit.
Yeah.
Yeah,
At my
Terrence is right. You're gonna have to separate your pooping and coffee retrieval. You're gonna have to get a little bit strategic.
yeah.
Bring a bucket. There you go. Just bring a bucket.
And yeah, my daily salary before tax, unfortunately, is 104 USD per day, which is really bad.
Yeah, I guess that's not great, but
Yeah. It could be worse.
I basically never get any taxes because I get taxes. Oh, I don't remember actually because I have so low pay. I like the lowest pay ever. And I usually get a lot of tax returns, which is really funny.
I love how you said that. You said
so
that in
that's
such a
pretty
tone that you said it in a tone that was like you were
funny.
bragging
That sounds
about it. Yeah.
right?
I have the lowest pay ever. Yeah. Yeah, I do too. It's great. It's great, isn't it? But yeah, like the tax system in Britain is it's
Oh,
20%. Sorry?
it's absolutely fantastic. I love it.
Yeah. It's 20% until you get to 50k a year. And hold on, let me just convert that to USD. 50,000.
Holy fuck! Sorry, that is insanely high. What the fuck, man?
Okay, when you get to 50k,
That is insane, dude. What the fuck? So high.
which is 65k USD, the tax rate then goes up to 40%. So there are probably people.
Oh my fucking god!
Yeah. There are probably people who are like just under the threshold, like they're making 48, 49k, who tell their bosses not to give them a pay rise. Because
That
if
is a
they
thing.
because if they get a pay rise and they go over the threshold, their actual take home pay after tax will be less than it was before. and it's just fucking perverse.
Yeah, every single country that has tax brackets has that problem. And it's really funny because before implementing a program like that, everybody and their sister was like, hey, aren't people just going to be incentivized to blah, 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 blah? I'm like, no, that's ridiculous. That's paranoid. And like, no, it's pretty much, if you could conceive of it being you know,
Yeah.
it just makes sense. People are going to follow the money and like find themselves in that situation, you know?
Jay Willie says I prefer neating in my parents' place. But yeah, I was a neat for just over 2 years, and it was great because I have rich parents that don't make me pay board, so I was able to just piss about and do whatever I wanted, basically. But then they were like, "Well, maybe you should try to act like an adult," and I was finally like, "Okay." So I got a job.
Yeah, no, when I came back from Hong Kong, I was needed up for like a few months because it was taking me a while to find a job.
Yeah.
And they kind of like yelled at me. I was like, okay, fine, I'll like find something faster. I mean, I did find something by then, so it was like,
Wait, who's they?
my my mom and stepdad
Oh, were you living with them?
for a little bit because after I
Yeah.
came back from Hong Kong, it's not didn't really have anywhere to go.
Yeah. So you were a beneficiary of their gibs for a bit.
Oh, sure. Well, and obviously I was before then too.
Yeah, yeah, and it's a glorious thing to be a beneficiary of your parents' gibs. It's not the same thing as state gibs because the parent-child bond is supposed to be unconditional, and that means an unconditional supply
voluntary.
of gibs. Yeah.
You choose
Well,
to
and
breed.
also it's voluntary. Like it's it's not. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that's the thing too, is like when you're like when people in your family are helping you out, you kind of feel a little bit more of an impetus to stop relying on them and to be a little more independent. Whereas if you're getting it from the government, I don't know, I
Yeah.
wouldn't feel bad. I'd be like, fuck it, I'm never gonna get back what they've taken from me.
But yeah, Jay Willie, did you enjoy neatdom as much as I did? For when you eventually respond in 10 minutes.
Fuck yeah! It was like it's like the best thing ever. You don't like
Yeah, go on.
like I don't need to cook food or clean. I don't need to cook food. I don't need to wash clothes. I don't need to clean my room. I don't need to buy anything. I don't need to do anything at all. I just like relax all day. It was like really funny.
Yeah.
Like I don't even need to do anything, right?
Yeah.
Like not studying for my driver's license. I'm not technically, so I don't think that's needing anymore. But I do have a weekend job. But like,
Yeah. And to be honest, I had more fun and
but
was
still, it's actually
probably
pretty awesome because you still get to
Yeah.
do all these other things that you.
in some days, in some ways, I was more productive when I was a NEET because, well, for one thing, I was going for 2-hour-long walks 7 days a week, like I was doing it every day, so I was more physically fit, and I was also like cooking all of my own meals and all that because I enjoy cooking. I don't see it as a chore, or well, okay, I kind of do see it as a chore, which is why I'm doing less of it now when I only have a few spare hours. But if I have lots of spare hours in the day, as I did back then, obviously I had all of them, then I was able to indulge that and like, yeah, let's try out some recipes. Yeah, go
Like
on.
even when I'm eating, I still don't have much time to do anything. Like even because I have like kind of, I don't know if I should call it bad autism, but it basically makes it very very hard doing anything, right? So I don't really have much spare hours, even though even when I was eating.
Yeah. Yeah.
I just
I
find
kind of
I'm
wonder
always
when does
racing my
something.
fridge. I'm always like eating whatever the oldest thing in the refrigerator is, and then hopefully I don't throw anything away.
You
Right?
ever straight up just, my mother always chastises me harshly for doing this. You ever just open a can of baked beans and just start eating it with a spoon? I do that sometimes.
I mean, I do things that might be comparable, but not with beans. I don't
I
think.
can't do that. I would be too gross.
The beans have got to be at least heated up.
Yeah.
Even
Yeah.
like heat it up and then you let it go cold. is like more appealing than straight out of the can somehow.
Yeah. I also prefer canned tomatoes to the real thing, like canned
Like
chopped
I
tomato.
can't eat something I can't do it.
You can't what?
But I do have a question though. I can't eat out of a can because I think it's too gross, especially when it gets to
Yeah, no MREs for him.
So
Like-
what was your question then?
no what?
Your question? What
Yeah,
was
my
it?
question is that how much do you need to do for not to be neating anymore? I work like some weekends here and there when I'm called in, right? And the work I do it mainly used to involve watching.
Wait, so you're asking like how much of a NEET do you have to be to count as a NEET? I mean, technically, if you have a part-time job, you're not a NEET.
Videos
Yeah.
and playing video games, right?
Is playing video games training for an event? Because then you're not a NEET.
Yeah. So like, can I ask like how many hours did you work per week, average? Oh my god.
Draw the
Yeah,
line.
he has no idea how much his
activities,
stuff's
like-
cutting out.
Yeah.
All right. Well, hey, we did address
And-
the topics of the stream and got through that video. I forgot how short that video was, though. I should plan
Yeah.
something more ambitious for
I
another
forgot.
stream.
Yeah, I forgot how entertaining this was, and I think it's a shame that you stopped doing these.
Yeah, no, it is a shame. I should have kept up doing it more.
Are you just like black-pilled? Is that kind of it?
Well, I want to do it.
I guess a little bit. Yeah, it's
soon
also
again when
it
I
is
get to
kind of
wake up
like
at the internet. So
yeah, and I would say Jay Willie look into like there might be things you can do that fix it up a little bit, whether it's if you have shit running in the background that's using the connection or like sometimes there are like free
closed up
VPNs that
everything.
can help. Okay. Well, I mean, yeah, anything you can think of, you know, because it's pretty rough, unfortunately.
Well, I'm at a country house now. I'm at a country house, our country house, which is not really that, which is kind of off. But when I go back to like our main like hub, I have much better internet.
Yeah.
It's like cable rather than Wi-Fi. We have.
Well, I hope it improves. I'm actually going to have to head off just now. So
Yeah,
it
I
was
was gonna bounce too, because I am looking outside and it is pretty nice out, and I am thinking, you know what, maybe I don't walk around outside, and maybe if I'm gonna be between jobs for a little bit, I should be walking a
Yeah.
couple hours a day. And also maybe streaming more
Well,
often.
I need to walk out every day.
Okay, I'll see you later.
All right, keep it easy.
To me, walking kind of hurts.
But yeah, if you see anything else that we should go over for like a stream,
Alright.
just post it in the thing, you know? And then, yeah, we can hobble something together for a plan.
Wait, what?
Oh, I'm just saying in general, like if you see
Yes,
anything
that
else
is
that'd be
actually
fun
kinda
to
fun.
discuss for a stream,
Like-
just post it in a server, you know?
Yes, I'll do it. Wait, your service or mine, or just both? Because
Well, either
way, I
way,
can
just tag me
you
so I
and
can
so you
find
know
it.
where to look.
Yep, exactly. And
It
yeah,
is
it was
perfect,
nice
I'll
to
do
see
that.
a couple of people hopping into the chat too.
That's not like
And all right, I'm gonna go ahead and kill the stream now. But yeah, everybody keep it easy, and yeah, we'll see you when I see ya.
yeah, it was actually. I actually did. Exactly.
Sorry, what?
I said, yeah, that's not a good plan.
Okay, good.
I
All right,
guess
we'll
I
talk to you
can't hear
later.
that.
See ya.
Okay. Bye-bye. Wait, why is it still live? It's still live, and I'm the only one here. And why did I get this stupid dialect from? I can't be the only one here. Like, what the fuck is up with this? Really?
Oh no, my thing is I
Oh,
accidentally
Lord
left
mercy.
the stream on StreamYard rather than ending the broadcast. So I had to hop back in to then do that. So now I'm gonna end it.
And I wonder if why